was yesterday, and I'm going to go see this movie called The Sheep Detectives with my grandmother, and it's like at a Fox Brew House or whatever. Which actually not a bad theater. They actually, if you're into like IPAs or whatever, they actually have like pretty funny names for IPAs. There's something with the state and IPA names. Like they actually down at the Texas Theater, they actually where Lee Harvey Oswald hit after the JFK assassination. They actually
Oh,
have an IPA called Lee Hazy Oswald. They make very bad jokes about it. But yeah, obviously not what I'm talking about. But initially, you know, Sheep Detectives is seen as a kids movie. Um, which I mean, yeah, basic that it is a family film. I mean, I think it could pretty much appeal to anybody. And if you want to know my thoughts on it, it's all right. That's probably as much as I put it. Um, but before the film started, the Moana live action trailer popped up,
oh, God.
and it sucked. Luckily, I saw. Luckily, I watched the movie, forgot about it, and then went on with my day. And then like I realized like shit, I got a tight schedule. And luckily there's a movie theater across the street from where I live. And it's like I gotta catch Mando and Grogu real quick. And when you're walking into a Disney film, you're gonna have the expectation that you're gonna be seeing Disney ads. And yeah, I know it's Lucasfilm, but it's under the same umbrella, regardless. And the Moana trailer plays again.
Oh, no.
And let me tell you, I remember my experience watching that trailer a second time at 10:30 at night than I do my feelings on the Mandalorian and Grogu.
Oh, boy. Little preview of what's to come.
Little preview, little preview. I don't know. I don't know. I feel like I don't want to make an effort to try to go catch the live action Moana, just because like you don't want to give the Disney company the wrong ideas at all. Because obviously, like when they see the money, it's like, oh, we're gonna keep doing this stuff. Doesn't matter the CEO, and doesn't matter like how badly the Snow White live action remake fumbled the ball. Because once we see the money, that's all. That's about it. That's about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Lilo and Stitch.
Do you feel obligated to see this at all?
Well, I guess in a way, I share a similar feeling to you is that if we go and see these movies, we are voting with our wallet and we are part of the problem. However, I made the foolish decision to dedicate a lot of research personally when I was in school into this subject of nostalgia studies. So now I unfortunately shot myself in the foot because of that research. It's like, well, now I feel a bit obligated to see some of these in order to further extend that. So unfortunately, I guess I kind of have to, even though every single time I go see them, I feel like such a fool and I do not have a good time. Maybe I'll be optimistic. Maybe this one won't be terrible, but I too saw the trailer. I believe it played before Mando and Grogu, and dear God save me, that was a horrendous trailer. Looked like an SNL skit almost. It just the whole vibe of it. The very idea that it exists is one thing, but just the execution looks really, really bad. And I don't know what the budget was, but it looks very cheap. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's crazy that we even have a Moana remake coming out and the original film is not even 10 years old yet. So
yeah.
it just makes
It's
no sense.
crazy from what I understood. I mean, I've looked into it, and I don't know. Maybe we'll talk about. Maybe we won't. I mean, if I'm gonna see it, I'd rather get a free ticket so I don't have to pay money. um, but from what I know, it's like The Rock was wanting to bring in, uh, his daughter loved the original Moana. Like The Rock's daughter loved the original Moana. So he sort of felt obligated that they want to do like a live action film. And of course, like, The Rock is a pretty profitable like actor, all things considered, minus Black Adam. But
He
he's
tried to take over the DC extended universe.
yeah, and it's kind of funny. Like he's trying to do the same thing with Disney, with this film, because I don't feel like there was ever an obligation to make a remake on something so recent, and you could just tell they're running thin on ideas with it. Like you could tell. I mean, I feel so bad for Shea-Frella's.
Oh,
Yeah, because
Tamatoa.
yeah, like how they massacred his poor boy. I mean, he even had a video out on it and like said, "Yeah, I'm not gonna bother trying to see this."
Good on him.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, like, yeah, if you're voting with your wallet, like, and if you're trying to go in, hate watch it all you can, it's like, yeah, you're pretty much in a bad spot. I mean, because you're gonna give them the wrong idea about it, and that's pretty much like what Disney is now. It's like too big to fail.
Yeah.
Too big to fail. They're not gonna care.
I love how The Rock, he has so much money and star power that he's like, it's cute that he wants to do this as a gift for his daughter, but it's like, yeah, I'm going to give my daughter a $150+ million Disney film as a gift. Like if it's really only for his kid, everyone else is basically suffering. It's like, at least he's being a good father, but the rest of us shouldn't have to suffer through it.
Yeah,
that's all I'll say.
It sort of reminds me of Shark Boy and Lava Girl and how how like Robert Rodriguez was like, I want to make this for my son. What was his son, Booster or whatever?
I thought his son came up with the story too.
Yeah,
wasn't his son involved?
His son came up with like the concept, which I guess you could maybe assume it was like maybe a children's drawing. I haven't read that much into it, but like. Yeah, the fact that film even exists is pretty funny, just because of that reason. And it sounds like this is the reason here.
Yeah, it's crazy that Rodriguez made that movie the same year that he did Sin City. I think that's hilarious. Just a really gritty noir adaptation with a lot of blood and violence and sex, and then you just have Shark Boy and Lava Girl, George Lopez with a big electric head and crappy 3D effects.
Yeah.
What a trajectory.
I love the kid who plays Linus in that movie.
Oh, the bully.
Yeah,
Send
the bully,
him to the principal office.
Like the acting is like so Shakespearean.
He ruined my dream journal. I haven't seen that movie in years, but I remember a lot about it for some reason.
Yeah, it's a core memory. It's a core memory.
It's a canon event.
Very much so. I remember it. I love that film growing up.
Maybe we should recommend it one day.
One day. One day. Not today. Not today.
Yeah.
But one day.
Before we proceed forward, I do have to agree. I did see The Sheep Detectives also somewhat recently, and it was a good film. A lot of heart, really sweet, very funny. Written by the guy who show ran The Last of Us and Chernobyl, Craig Mazin. So.
Oh, that's crazy.
Oh, you didn't know? Yeah. It's really funny.
I walked in blind. I knew the actors in it. I walked in completely blind, and this is not a review for that anyway. But I, surprised that it has some maturity in it. Which, hey, I mean, if there's somebody that could bring a level of maturity, why not the guy that wrote Chernobyl and the last?
Yeah.
So, I know.
Also, the superhero movie. I don't know if you saw that.
I am not.
It's It's one of those crappy mid-2000s spoof parody films, and he wrote that. I think he directed it actually.
You're talking about Drake the one Bell. With Drake Bell. Oh man.
Yeah, and I think it was Leslie Nielsen's last role, unfortunately.
Oh man.
That he went out with a whimper.
We'll talk about parody movies someday, but I don't know.
Yeah. But, speaking of whimpers.
whimpers. Yeah, so admittedly, we're about a little late on this, but I think, it's still something good to talk about, especially considering the host direct that we have for uh, later this episode.
Mhm.
But The Mandalorian and Grogu recently came out,
It did?
directed by, or yeah,
That was a joke.
it did. Like, oh, we forget?
Because
I
I
mean,
heard it got overtaken by a under $1 million indie film, and no one cares about the new Star Wars film.
yeah. And now it's getting overtaken by a $10 million horror prestige drama at the box office and backrooms. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like you're having two horror films that, like, were made far less than this movie. And somehow those films have ended up being much more profitable than this.
How the mighty have fallen.
Oh boy. Very much so. But it's Star Wars. I love Star Wars. But yeah, for those who don't know, The Mandalorian Grogu is a film directed by Jon Favreau, written by now president of Lucasfilm, I believe president or a CEO, Dave Filoni, who, if that name sounds familiar, has been responsible for Star Wars: The Clone Wars TV show and Star Wars Rebels, and him and Favreau have been sort of part of the late 2010s, early 2020s resurgence of Star Wars content after the original saga ended. So they were sort of like the catalyst for all the shows, including Andor, although like Andor, I think it was more executive produced by one of them than it was like actually written. Anyway, but the film follows Mandalorian, or Mando as I like to call him, and his baby Yoda son Grogu, who both get roped up in a plot where they have to go find Rada the Hutt, who is the little baby from the Clone Wars TV show movie.
Voiced by the bear.
Voiced by Jeremy Allen White.
Yeah.
But that's basically the film. I guess before we jump into like the thoughts on the film itself, I guess like what were you thinking about The Mandalorian before this? I guess
I don't remember if we ever talked about The Mandalorian on Bijou Banter. I want to say we didn't, but
we talked about Boba Fett.
That's right. Okay, we did talk about Boba Fett. Yeah,
but
that was another show.
Yeah, and we never talked about like the actual show.
No, yeah, that was another show that wasn't particularly great. But no, The Mandalorian, I remember the first two seasons I think are very solid in that this sort of new era of Star Wars that is heavily relying on the streaming services and the Disney Plusification. I thought it did a good job expanding the universe. It felt more like a space western comparable to, I know the influences were very much like a Clint Eastwood type Man with No Name storyline, and it also touched on the aspects of fatherhood as well. And it did. The nice thing about the Mandalorian show was that it did feel like a natural extension of the Star Wars mythology. I felt like I feel like these characters are existing in the same timeline as the Skywalker saga, and it's fleshing out this universe even more. So I really, really liked it. I particularly really like season 2. I think season 2 is great. Season 3 kind of dropped the ball. There were some decent moments, but then there was moments where I thought, what were they smoking? Like Jack Black and Lizzo showing up, and then the ending made no sense. So it was announced that they were going to do Mandalorian season 4, which I still don't know if that's happening or if this took the place of it. But concurrently, they announced that they were going to do a film adaptation of the show, basically extending the mythology and the storyline. And this was also the first Star Wars theatrical film since The Rise of Skywalker. So when you put that into perspective, it's kind of crazy that we haven't had a Star Wars film since then. And after Mandalorian season 3, I just felt more indifferent to it. I'm just like, okay, it seems like it might be decent. Like it could be harmless. And the first trailer wasn't that impressive. But then the second trailer, I'm just like, you know what? There might be something here. I think this might be a fun time. So I went in, I wouldn't say excited, but I also wasn't dreading it. I'm just like, okay, this will just be, I'm just expecting something average. But I did not expect to walk out of that film not only bored out of my skull, but also borderline offended by how lazy it was. I thought this was genuinely awful. And I'm kind of surprised to say that because it's not like the film was material wise was offensive, but it just didn't do anything. It felt like the laziest, cheapest, soulless way to make a Star Wars film in any way, shape, or form. And a lot of people were talking about this on Twitter, was just, why does this film, The Mandalorian and Grogu, look exactly like the Disney Plus streaming content? Ostensibly, if you're a theatrical release, you want a level up in quality or in some way, but no, it was indistinguishable from the Disney Plus content. And in some cases, maybe worse because it was shown in like the premium formats. Like I saw this in the IMAX theater, which for some reason had 1.43 to 1 scenes, but there was no reason to have them. It didn't correlate at all. But that, besides getting to the technical stuff, just the overall narrative, it felt just nothing. It's like, okay, Mando and Grogu, they have to go save Rada the Hutt, I guess, because there's this because he's this target, I guess, to exchange information or something. I don't even remember, honestly, all that much because I saw this opening night and I have not thought about it literally one bit until now. So fortunately, I'm glad you saw this recently. You might be able to fill me in on some things. But overall, I just sitting there in the theater, I was so unengaged and just not having it the entire time, which was a shame because I like Star Wars. I like The Mandalorian. This should have been right up my alley, but they took the laziest route possible to ultimately make it. This is not the worst Star Wars film. I will say that, but it is really, really poor and just absolutely worthless. It's the most worthless Star Wars film ever. There's nothing here.
Man.
Yeah, it's bad.
Yeah. It is. I think it is bad, except I don't think I hate it quite as much as you do. Because back up for a minute. So I think when I remember the day The Mandalorian came out, because it was like the first day I bought like Disney Plus. And I remember like watching the first episode, and I remember being blown away by it. Just because of like the reason of the fact that it's sort of taking what George Lucas did with the original, with the first Star Wars, where he's taking very familiar tropes and archetypes from past like pieces of media, whether it be written, whether it be visual, and incorporating it into this universe. And yeah, because I remember like watching the first season, it's like reminds me a lot of like Clint Eastwood, who like just said he was like going to be retiring this year. But you know, legend obviously, but regardless. But yeah, it reminded me a lot of like the Man of No Name trilogy. Took a lot of influence, like just from the Western, and just tried to incorporate that into Star Wars, which actually fit pretty well. And I think that's like one thing I really took away from the first 2 seasons of the show. And it just kind of felt like, okay, you're taking Star Wars back to its roots, but you're doing something new with it. You're doing something different with it. It actually feels fresh, especially after like the failures of the sequel trilogy. But it actually felt like that they were doing something that was interesting. And Jon Favreau seemed like to be in a better creative mindset than he was on the Lion King remake. And of course, having Dave Filoni aboard, who I mentioned before, who's worked on Clone Wars, like was, you know, a very good pick to sort of be writing on this show. And then having a team of directors that could like switch in and out of episodes without, you know, killing any continuity. And yeah, the first 2 seasons were good. Season 3 did fumble the ball, but I don't know if I necessarily blame season 3 as much as I blame the Book of Boba Fett, just because they sort of ended both of Mando and Grogu's arcs a little bit too soon. Like they kind of felt like a segue. Like whenever those episodes popped up in that show, I kind of felt like it was a detour. It didn't really build to anything outside of ending these characters' arcs because, the rest of the Boba Fett show just wasn't that interesting. And so their eventual reunion was rushed. And so season 3 like didn't have anything to go off of. And so that's why they sort of just like, oh, we're gonna bring back, Goff, Moff Gideon or whatever. We're gonna bring Jack Black and Lizzo for some reason, and obviously didn't work. And it kind of felt like that there was not any arcs for Mando and Grogu to really go through, since their arcs were just speed ran through during the Book of Boba Fett. And so this kind of felt like it was a Mando and Grogu. Well, I'm just going to call it Mando and Grogu because Mandalorian and Grogu is a little bit too big of a mouthful, although it already sounds like I have a mouthful. When you say that in quick succession, it's like people are, what the fuck are you talking about? Anyway, but I think the issue with The Mandalorian and Grogu, I know I just contradicted myself anyway, but the issue with it is that Mando and Grogu aren't interesting protagonists for this type of film. And what I mean by that is that since they've already went through big developments as characters early on, there isn't much to really leech off of here. And that's like, okay, like that's fine. There's been examples of like, characters like this sort of like working, like what Mad Max Fury Road, like the main character doesn't go through much progression as much as the side characters do. So it's like, okay, you could take that route. And, when this was advertised, I was thinking it was going to be sort of like those Star Wars pulp magazines. I mean, I don't know if you remember, but like way back in the 2000s, like there was the Star Wars magazine that like released like I think monthly or whatever, and they would have comics that are sort of like separate from the films and the shows, and actually like they felt out of universe, but they were pretty cool. They seemed like pulp magazines. It's kind of like those old Disney pulp magazines you would see from the 2000s, which like they're not connected to any film, but they're sort of like you can kind of put in like say like, okay, this was sort of a stopgap in between like the stories of the film before everything changed. But regardless, but I was thinking like, okay, it's going to be sort of like a pulp magazine, and it wasn't that way. It just felt like some 12 episodes of a TV show that were stitched together into a film. And I'm not saying it's like quite as obvious as like say something like Moana 2 or the Disney sequels. I think those are the more egregious examples of like, you know, TV shows that should have been TV shows, but instead they decided to put them in theaters just to make it into a movie. I think that's sort of the big difference. But here it's just like it's not quite as deliberate, but it's just like from a plot perspective, there just isn't anything underneath. It's so straightforward. It's so simple. It's like it don't really figure that much about the characters at the end of the day. I mean, the only time in the film where I felt like I did was like, this, and I guess spoilers for Mandalorian and Grogu was when Mando gets poisoned and is on his deathbed basically, and Grogu is just spending like the next 15 minutes taking care of him because they actually gave the character something to do aside from looking cute half the time. Because that's kind of like a point where it's like, okay, they actually felt like they were trying to do something there, but for the most part, it's like they just didn't do anything. It's just like it's just such a nothing burger of a movie. So
the pulp magazine comparison is very interesting because they sort of leaned into on that in the advertising, like with the type font and the poster art. And I remember thinking, okay, that's an interesting tone for a Star Wars film. If it were a little, not tongue in cheek, but if it was more aware of its Avenger status, kind of like what I presume what Lord and Miller had in mind for their version of Solo, a Star Wars story, before they got fired. So there was something there where I can understand from a business-minded decision why this was pushed forward. I understand that, but the film itself didn't evoke that at all. It was just an unmotivated marketing choice. And just the entire time with the film, it just seemed like the action scenes, which aren't even that good to begin with, like Star Wars is, I would say, it's arguable if you can consider it an action film, but there's a lot of memorable action set pieces in all of the films. Like when you think about the original trilogy, the Hoth battle in Empire Strikes Back, a lot of the lightsaber fights in the prequels, for example, or even in the sequel trilogy, like some of the X-Wing fights are pretty impressive, but in Mandalorian and Grogu, there is not a single good action scene. It's all shot in the most boring way possible. The CGI is terrible. And worse is that you just don't care about Mando and Grogu, really. I don't even know if it necessarily insists on it, but it just seems like they thought of, hey, let's have 10 cool action scenes with Mando and Grogu. Oh, but we need a story to go along with it. Let's just like scotch tape it together and like hope it works in the edit. And it didn't, because the movie felt like 5.5 hours long, even though it was 2 hours and 13 minutes. It felt way too long for what it needed to be. And up until like by the time we got to the third act, I was just so checked out. But what you said about the one scene where Mando is poisoned and then Grogu has to save him and basically take care of him, it's almost like the first act of WALL-E, where it's just all visual storytelling. And I remember thinking, dang, why wasn't this at the start of the film? Because if it started like there somehow and then built up to the action, that would have been really interesting and almost a unique subversion. But you did too little too late. And by that point, I didn't care about what was happening. It's not like you established much more with the Mando character all that much besides him escaping the Jabba palace, essentially, where he takes his mask off, which the whole movie felt just cheap in that regard too, because that's the only time where we see Pedro Pascal like without the mask. The entire time he has the mask on, so I doubt he was even on set for a good 80% of the shoot. He just spent a few days in the voice booth. But then, yeah, after that just goes back into more of the action scenes. I guess the X-Wing fight near the end wasn't atrocious, but still it wasn't good. And I just am reminded of the fact that Jon Favreau, I don't think he's an awful director, but he just doesn't have any sort of style, unfortunately. Like, I think Elf is pretty funny and the first Iron Man is good. But ever since then, like, I don't know what happened, but he just has no interesting visual style. And it works fine, I guess, when he's directing one episode of Mandalorian. But when he's doing a whole film, there's no personality to the way it's shot, to the lighting or the framing. It just looks like a Disney Plus TV show. And it's just crazy how, in a way, we could probably go more in depth this, but this film really exemplified just how washed Star Wars has become in the Disney era. And I know this is something that people just complain about more and more, but this is very evident just to show how much Star Wars has changed, and not for the right reason, because it's not like they're messing around with the canon or the lore, but it just feels lazy and cheap. This is like the Marvelification, let's just describe it as, where it's not an event anymore. Like back in the days, Star Wars, when a new Star Wars film came out, it was exciting. It was like, whoa, there's a new episode in the saga. This is a once in a lifetime generational experience. Like when Force Awakens came out, everyone saw it. It was huge. This is the first Star Wars film in 7 years and nobody cares. Because you're not giving the audience a reason to care, as evidenced by the fact that in the second weekend, it had a massive drop, overtaken by Backrooms and Obsession, deservedly so, because those are good films. Like, there's no reason to come back to this, and it's just, I don't know, it's very unfortunate how the mighty have fallen, I guess.
Yeah, and it's the thing is like I know like people like to harp on Disney's like treatment of Star Wars a lot. Because like yeah, they didn't initially have much of a plan with like the sequel trilogy, which we'll get into, and they just pretty much tried to like give it off to creators who could do something with it, but still be under their oversight. Um, and to be honest, like the thing that I do appreciate with what Disney has done is that they're at least trying to maintain like some aspects of the original trilogy. Like, the VFX work is not good in this movie. It's very subpar.
No, it's not
But
good.
I can at least say that there is a dedication to like the practical effects that you like saw that you don't see often in the modern age of filmmaking. I mean, I think now CGI has come such a long way where, we're able to like be able to make things look as realistic as they can. But like the thing I appreciate with this, it's like, you don't have to worry about CGI with Baby Yoda because like, he looks just as real. He looks just as like you could tell it's a puppet, but there's life to it. And so I think in terms of visual effects, like, I appreciate that, John Favreau is trying to bring it back to like the roots of the original trilogy and trying to like, be sure that okay, this looks as real as possible. And ensure that like, there's emotion coming across from these puppets, which, it's still very well like done like animatronic and puppet work. It's like something that I think has been a big high point with The Mandalorian is the fact that they make this little thing that's like stuffed, probably like stuffed with like cotton or whatever, into something that is very real. So it is really impressive. Um, so that's like one thing I can give like when it comes to Disney's like handling of Star Wars. Like, okay, they're at least trying to make it look like that these things are real. But like, yeah, the VFX work just is very subpar. I mean, you could tell when there's green screen, you could tell when there's CGI used. I think it's very more apparent in the times when you're using the huts as
Oh
like
yeah,
as action heroes in some
yeah,
sense. Like
yeah. It looks awful.
yeah, it's like, okay, that's just a little weird. I mean, it looks good in concept. I mean, when they're still, it's like, okay, that's awesome. But like, I didn't want to imagine like what it would be like to see a hut just like go ham. Although, like, yeah, there's points where it looks insane and just seeing a lot of the hut move or whatever. But it's just like, you could just tell there's such a fakeness to it. I mean, and I guess like, but it's not like the worst VFX. I think I've seen far worse. But yeah, it is very, very subpar. Um, and I think that's what really does sort of kill like the whole immersion, kind of, because like what you seeing the dedication and the practical effects with like the droids and Baby Yoda or whatever. But you're not seeing that much in terms of like the huts, where it's like they actually had practical models for those. Why didn't you use them?
Yeah.
It's
It
crazy.
it also goes to show that in some cases limitations of the time become strengths in that way. Like everything about Jabba in Return of the Jedi, just the fact that he's this big, massive puppet and he really just sits there, but that almost makes him more intimidating, just the fact that he's real. And that's kind of why in the special editions it almost ruined the mystique because, oh, cool, he's like walking around talking to Han Solo, but I don't know, it loses the realness of it. It just you could tell, oh, he's a model created computer. And when you see the Hutts just fighting, duking it out, it's almost they just feel like these lifeless blobs just fighting, and it takes away the intensity from them. They don't feel like not like the development of their status as villains was even good in the film either, but just the fact that it's like, oh, they fight, they move around, they're like heavy and stuff, but it just doesn't feel real. And even the whole thing, though, I think I read somewhere, I don't know if this was in an interview with Jon Favreau or maybe I just read this somewhere, but apparently this was the first Star Wars film that was shot entirely in Los Angeles. And it really shows because Yeah, even though some of these are sets, I assume built on sound stages, it just looks really artificial and fake. Where I just don't believe that these characters are in a Star Wars universe. I just can tell, oh, they're on the Disney backlot filming in that neon city that looks like downtown Chicago, and oh, they're in the desert landscape against that warped green LED green screen that the Mandalorian pioneered. Which, yeah, it's at the time when the Mandalorian came out, that was very impressive for compositing and stuff. But now it's been 7 years. It's not as impressive anymore when you don't really evolve with the times. And if we want to talk about just another bad action, can we talk about that awful, atrocious gladiator fight type scene with that was I could like watching that. I was like, is this a Star Wars film? This doesn't look like Star Wars. This looks like a bad Mortal Kombat knockoff. Yeah, I don't know. It was so like I understand that they're establishing, oh, in the Star Wars universe, there are these underground fight clubs where the rich elite bet on the creatures to kill them and duke it out in the gladiator arena. Like I understand that they're bringing in the level of class and power, but there had to have been a more interesting way to show it because it looks so stupid and the action just goes on way too long. It's just all these random creatures that aren't even designed that well fighting with Mando and all that, and it goes on forever. It just felt like they're padding out the time.
Yeah, and it's like the thing is like, and we could bring in like the example from Attack of the Clones, which in my opinion I think is probably the worst of the saga up until
Yeah,
like
it
Last
sucks.
Rise of Skywalker came out.
I
But
disagree.
yeah, but I think there is but I think there's like that scene in on Geonosis where there is essentially like a gladiator arena. And no, the CGI like from those films have not held up the best, but I can at least say I remember those scenes a lot. Um, because you remember the Acklay or whatever, like just sort of screeching, or screeching. You remember that giant cat spider thing or whatever, and like the rhino, like you remember those creatures, and it was all so simple, um, and it's easy to like feel the stakes in that situation. I mean, for some reason, like despite the fact that the acting was so wooden in that entire trilogy, like there was actually a way to actually somehow feel for these characters. Like that's the odd part about it. But here it's just like, so Mando's not given much characterization. And then you have Rada the Hutt here, who, I give credit, like they're trying to give like a one off character from the Clone Wars movie something to do. Which honestly, I'm not actually mad about, like, seeing this type of character in this universe like this way. I mean, it's actually interesting to see a Hutt sort of be like bulk and strong and sort of just like like a UFC fighter sort of. Like there isn't, to me, I don't have much of an issue with that. But it's like there's just not very much characterization given to Rada the Hutt in this film. And Jeremy Allen White sounds like he's just like recording voice memos on his phone for his
Oh, you could care
performance.
less about the movie.
Yeah. I mean, it's
What
like,
a
yeah,
terrible
yeah,
performance.
yeah. It's like, yeah, you got a good kid. It's like, and I know I heard like, that he wanted to try to like make his voice sort of match the voices of the Hutts, because when the Hutts do speak, they sort of speak in a way that just sounds like inhuman, sort of like just a little bit like, apathetic towards certain things, which, made them very intimidating characters in the universe. But like when Jeremy Allen White speaks, he sounds like he's just like, yeah, just gonna, hey, Greg.
He's, he sounds like Team U Optimus Prime.
Yeah, he does, and it's like they add the Hut distortion to his voice, and it just doesn't fit. Like, yeah, you got a good kid. That's like you sound like
I'm a fighter.
yeah, you sound like the CrossFit guy, I would come across on my way to class every day back in Iowa. It's like, okay, come on. But it's like the thing is, there's nothing like there's not such a lack of characterization given to both of those characters. I mean, it's lack of a characterization in general for a lot of these characters in this film. Um, but it's so it makes like this sequence feel rather pointless because like I'm not caring about Mandalorian in the situation. I'm not caring about Rada or Grogu. Like, oh yeah, sure, Grogu looks cute, but Grogu doesn't really have much of a character. Like
There's only so
as
much you could do.
yeah, it's like in film form, and I mean, I think just like a lot of people question, like, okay, why doesn't Grogu just like grow up? Why hasn't he talked yet? And I guess my understanding is like the Yoda species or whatever, which they still haven't given a name, which I guess like makes sense because they want to keep the mystery of like that character alive in some cases. But like, yeah, like I understand that maybe that type of species ages slower, so Grogu could live up to like 400 years or whatever. But regardless, the thing like about this sequence is like since I don't care about these characters, I'm not really caring about the stakes here because it's just you're throwing the most uninteresting creatures at me that just don't look good in a vacuum. And I get it's like trying to look like that giant chessboard thing from A New Hope where they're playing that game or whatever. Which okay, that's a fun idea, but it just looks very bland. As you could tell, it's like built on that CGI soundstage or whatever, and you're not given like weight to like this world at all. I mean, it just looks very boring. Um, which is which Star Wars is anything but. I mean, the thing I always enjoy about Star Wars is you get to see different worlds, you get to see how they all function. But like this world, it's like, I mean, you could just switch this out with any other world they've been to, like the world in the Obi-Wan show, or the world in some of the Clone Wars episodes. It's like it looks like every other Star Wars land I've ever seen. It doesn't do anything that new. I mean, it's like, I mean, I get there's like so much you could do, but if at least give some personality. Like that's what there needs to be is personality. It's just not there.
Yeah. Not even that this would be too far fetched, but why not put them in a more perilous environment too? Because they're just in what desert, not even desert, like beach, Malibu beach like locations, like where the rebel base is, where Sigourney Weaver's character, I guess, hides out. Then there's that city area, which just looks like any other American city. And then there's the forest, which I guess they were trying to take influence from like a bayou environment, but that's just like we've established that in Star Wars that there's like Mustafar, for example, the lava or just extreme climates. Like, why not put the characters in more perilous, high stakes, interesting situations? Even then, if it doesn't, it almost wouldn't. I guess in some ways it wouldn't matter because just the narrative itself was very one note and boring. But even just having that would have made it more interesting from a visual standpoint. Like the cinematographer was, I think it was David Klein, who, it's funny enough, before he did Mandalorian, he shot most of the Mandalorian show, but before that he worked primarily with Kevin Smith. So like not an action cinematographer. He just did reverse shot of two guys in a convenience store. And he doesn't bring that sense of flavor or fun to the action scenes or just understanding how to show off the Star Wars universe. Like every shot, especially when characters are talking, looks indistinguishable from any episode of The Mandalorian. And it's very frustrating to see that, even in a case where if you're trying to make it seem like this is in line with the visual style of the show, fine, but you could still level that up in some way for a theatrical experience. And I know we've been very negative, but I think if there's two positives I have with the film that I want to address, I think they're worth bringing. One, the only person that felt like they were really trying for some reason was Ludwig Göransson, fantastic composer, 3-time Oscar winner. I don't know what direction he was given, but he was just like, I'm going to make this score so awesome for a movie that absolutely does not need it. But honestly, thank God he did, because it did kind of help with the experience. Like he really tried. And I think this film further evidence that he is one of the best composers working in the industry right now, where he was able to bring this level of A game to a project that absolutely did not deserve it. So good on you, Ludwig. And then the second thing that was good, Martin Scorsese as the little, what was it, shopkeeper?
Yeah,
The
the little
absolute cinema
shop.
guy. The
Oh,
absolute cinema guy and the voice of Sykes the Blowfish in Shark Tale. It was nice to see him come out of acting retirement for this film. That was about it.
yeah, he's been
That's
out,
the only.
he's been out for a while. He was on the studio. He actually got a nomination for an
Oh,
Emmy for it.
I haven't seen the studio. So.
Yeah, he's actually pretty funny in it. But yeah, it's good to see
Oh yeah.
Sykes from Shark Girl like get back.
Also, I heard he makes movies, which is really interesting. I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, he does. He does. Maybe some Oscar winning ones. Who knows?
Yeah, we all gotta start somewhere.
Yeah. But yeah,
No, I just remember when the trailer came out and people were like, "Is that Martin Scorsese? Like, what is he doing here?"
I just remember I texted you one day, and it was like, like wait, when was Martin Scorsese in The Mandalorian and Grogu? Then you sent me the trailer, and it's like, okay, I assume he's just in this for one off scene,
Yeah.
but he somehow got like screen credit for this.
I mean, to be fair, there's not many major actors in this film because they're all just either behind Mandalorian masks or puppeteers.
Yeah,
So,
I mean,
because it's
Sigourney Weaver.
it's Pedro Pascal, who probably got paid like $10 million for a few days' work.
Mhm.
Honestly, yeah, Sigourney Weaver and then Jeremy Allen White.
Yeah,
That was basically it. There's not really any like other major actors in the film.
yeah, definitely not. I mean, I know I saw Dave Filoni in a cameo, but that's about it. I mean, there was Steve Blum.
Oh yeah, he was in the bar.
Yeah, there was also Steve Blum who played Zeb, who was like a character on Rebels that I never really gave a shit about. So like, but it's like I don't know. I remember him having more character in that show than him here. Like, yeah, you just gotta fly in, and it's like, weren't you like some sort of like smartass sort of like, weren't you like sort of like a very goofy bulk guy in that show? But like, I don't know. I guess they just wanted to give Steve Bloom something to do. Who knows? And then what? Imbo the bounty hunter. Um, it was like, yeah, a big character in Clone Wars. Like he was like one of the bounty hunters in that show. Which means yeah, you got to watch the show much better than this. But
I should, yeah.
yeah, but it's like, yeah, he's like in this movie. It's like, oh, remember him? Remember when he was with Cad Bane, who was also in the Book of Boba Fett, who was also in Clone Wars? And it's like, yeah, it's member berries.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, but without a good point, like say what you want about the sequel trilogy, at least that had some justification for doing that, even if it might not have, still might be annoying, but at least I understand why they did it.
yeah, and it's like the thing is, it's Filoni's writing that I think has really deteriorated over time because the thing is like the thing that made the first two seasons of The Mandalorian so fresh. And you could argue about this with like the Acolyte, maybe Skeleton Crew, but the thing is, what made those so fresh is that they were their own. It was its own story. It took place in the Star Wars universe. It wasn't super connected to like the saga. I mean, yeah, there's mention, yeah, the Empire's in it, but it's not. It's a different version of the Empire. It's like an empire that's like trying to rebuild or whatever, get back to where they want to be. But obviously they got to stop them. But it's a different version of the Empire. It's not like the Empire you see in Andor. But it was its own show. Like the characters were their own characters. And yeah, sure, they brought in like some iconic characters like Boba Fett in season 2, Ahsoka Tano, and bring back CGI deep fake Luke Skywalker or whatever. But the thing is, they were only there in like small spurts. Like they never felt like that those characters were like gonna like be a huge presence in some case, like because it still was like Mandalorian and Grogu's story. But I feel like with Dave Filoni, it's like he's just wanting to incorporate as many of his Clone Wars characters as he's feasibly able to in this film and other Star Wars stuff for that matter. And it's like, don't get me wrong. I mean, I love the Clone Wars TV show. I think it's honestly one of the best like animated shows of all time. But why why can't you just let this be like its own thing? I mean, I think that's like an issue with like the writing. It's like, it's like, oh yeah, I want to incorporate Rada the Hutt, you want to incorporate all these characters, but it's like they don't leave impact as live action characters. I mean, Rada the Hutt never really left a big impact as like a character in the Clone Wars show because he was a toddler in that show. Like it's not much of doesn't make much sense from like a writing perspective, and he's just I don't know, he's just very like I don't know. It's like you want to include these characters, I get it, but like, don't try to like ruin a good thing. Like I
Uh,
love Mandalorian. Like,
I'll give the film credit as someone who has not seen the Clone Wars and as someone who is not familiar with a lot of those characters. I will say it's not like they really linger on them all that much in this film. And to the film's credit, it's not like this is one where it's entirely dependent on your knowledge of the Clone Wars or the Mandalorian show to enjoy it. And I think that might have been their goal. They wanted it to be stand on its own. It's like, oh, just the average moviegoer can go watch it and understand it. Which, okay, I can respect that, but it's not like they wrote a good movie independently. Like the movie still, it's bad. So they didn't really succeed on that level. So it's not like an MCU side project where, oh yeah, you gotta do your homework and watch 30 films and 5 TV shows to understand why this one character showed up in this one scene. It's not like that, but if you wanted it to stand independently, like I think there had to have been a better story to go alongside it that just made not that it's incoherent. Well, in some cases it's incoherent just because it's so action focused, but just the fact that there's no drama, there's no stakes, there's no real character arcs either. Like I don't know. Like it's kind of pointless. Sorry, I'm like struggling to even think about other things to say.
yeah, I mean, it's like nothing. It's like it's just throwing things
It is
at you.
nothing.
I mean, I mean, it's like I appreciate all the work Ludwig Göransson put into the score. Like, I mean, you didn't have to go that hard. I mean, he's doing the Odyssey in a month from now, and like he's obviously on a huge run as a composer right now. Like it's kind of emblematic of John Williams in some cases, but he's like he's going like really hard on this score, like including hip hop beats and just you know the Mandalorian theme still sounds epic. I mean
Mm-hmm.
that's a great theme song. Like he does a good job experimenting with the score here, and it sounds great. It sounds great, especially like atmospheric, quiet moments. But it's carrying the film, and the film has nothing of value really to it. And it's like a shame because like people love the Mandalorian, people love these characters, but it's like it just kind of felt like it was a last ditch effort for Disney to try to really reach another audience for a new generation of Star Wars. And it's like, for one, this show came out almost 8 years ago now, almost no, 7 years ago technically, but um, like it came out so long ago,
Mm-hmm.
and your audience has like moved on, obviously, and the newer audience is like not quite as like into it as much as like the old audiences. And the thing is, like Star Wars films used to be such events. I remember the days like Force Awakens when that came out. Like everybody was screaming in the theater like, "Yeah, that was awesome." Remember when Revenge of the Sith came out, first Star Wars
Mm-hmm.
film in theaters? But it's like there's just such a lack of memory. Like I remember like what in my theater was me and then like two other people, and like there's like 30 other people watching Obsession next door. It's like this is depressing.
Yeah. If if you were to show your kid this movie as like their first Star Wars film, I guarantee you they would not become a Star Wars fan after this,
Mhm.
just 'cause it's so dull.
Yeah,
Like,
it's dull. I mean, I think it has moments. Like I said, I mean, I think the VFX are, they're not the best, but I can at least say I do like the dedication to the practical effects. That one sequence with Grogu and the music. It's like that's very much the only things that are like holding this film together. But it's like it's just a nothing burger. So
yeah, I don't have much else to add, honestly. So,
yeah. So yeah, I guess final
uh,
thoughts.
final thoughts. Yeah, it's not the worst Star Wars film ever, but it's still very, very bad and is I know it's the funny thing is that it's not even the most boring because Attack of the Clones exists. Like that's another sauceless movie. But in terms of motivation to make a Star Wars movie, this was easily the worst one because at least George Lucas had a plan with the prequels. And even though Disney, it was clear that the sequel trilogy was more just because, oh, we own the property now. And they were clearly writing it as they went along. At least that had some justification. But this one was just like, Star Wars is still popular. Why not? Let's just make another one, just throw it together in editing, and there we go. So yeah, no motivation, no artistic purpose. Ludwig Göransson tried, Martin Scorsese tried, nobody else did. Well, I guess whoever did the stop motion actually, they did a fine job, but otherwise, absolutely worthless. No good action, inconsequential plot. It's really sad to say any of that about a Star Wars film, especially one where there has not been. We've had a Star Wars film drought for 7 years. Like the fact that this came out was just like, wow, it's really sad. So yeah, 2 out of 10, not good at all, and I never want to see it again.
Yeah, I'm gonna be a little kind to it. I think really more or less, it's gonna probably be a 3 to 4 out of 10. Um,
Okay, that's fair.
yeah, just because like for one, it's not like the most offensive thing ever made. I mean, honestly, I felt a little more offended by like Michael than I did this. Um, but then again, completely different films, completely different reasons for being that way. But I can at least say that, there is at least some effort put into the stop motion technology. I mean, that one sequence of Grogu is, it's not like amazing, but it does give me something to at least latch onto. It was a nice sequence of good music, good visual storytelling. Really could have just been like I said, it could have just been the star of the movie or even just like its own episode. But obviously, this is a TV show that was put into a movie, like an entire season of a TV show. And so you're putting yourself in a really tough spot already. And so, I mean, I feel bad because, I could tell that, there are a lot of creatives that work at Lucasfilm. And, I actually do know somebody who works as like an assistant editor on like one of the Star Wars animated shows.
Oh
But
no way.
yeah, yeah, it's a friend of a family member. But like I know how dedicated people at Lucasfilm are. They're, really in reality, it's not the fault of the creatives. But I think Disney and Lucasfilm, like the corporate side at least, like is trying to be desperate right now with this brand that is just not latching on to people right now. And, I think it still can. Like, it's no doubt that this like franchise could still latch on to people. I mean, I still know like parents that show their kids like, the original trilogy or even the prequel trilogy for that matter. I mean, that's because, that's how much value like this content has. But there's just not much here with the Mandalorian and Grogu, unfortunately. And Ludwig Göransson tried. He made a good score. I was actually listening to it today while I was working. Um, but like, yeah, definitely not the worst thing in the world. But I still think we could have gotten a little bit better. So, but yeah, that's just Star Wars for you, man. At least right now.
Yeah, yeah. At least for now.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we'll get more into Star Wars later on, but we got another film to talk about.
Oh yeah,
Total
that.
opposite of Star Wars in terms of blockbuster capitalist films.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, this is a film that is very anti-capitalist. And that is Boots Riley's "I Love Boosters," starring Keke Palmer, Naomi Aki, Taylor Page, like Keith Stanfield, and Demi Moore. Like a really really good cast. And the film is essentially like a it's essentially about like these group of women called boosters who basically break in to a fashion mogul's numerous stores to take clothing and sell them to the street. And they kind of get roped up into some many other crazy things along the way. But yeah, it's this film is wild.
Yeah.
But yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Well, have you seen anything else from Boots Riley before this?
Yeah, I saw Sorry to Bother You. That's actually one of my favorite films of 2020. I
Oh,
think it
nice.
was a very well made film, and I think like Boots Riley has like uh a good sense of style when it comes to his stuff, because the thing is like he sort of is reminiscent of early Spike Lee in my opinion, where he lets the
Mm.
mise en scène sort of demonstrate the commentary. And he's not afraid to be on the nose with it. Um, and that's like something I do admire about him, because I know there's like filmmakers out there that like, or at least audience goers out there that just hate when a message is shoved in their face. But Boots Riley has a way of like doing that isn't just like making it feel like you're going to be alienated by it. It's just like something where it's like, oh, it's like, okay, you have my attention, and you know I want to hear what you're talking about or trying to show me here. And admittedly, that's like the only thing I've seen from him. I know there's been a show that I believe was on Amazon that he did.
Yeah. Yeah,
Like
I'm Virgo.
I Am Virgo. Yeah, I still got to see
That's
that.
good.
But I do love Sorry to Bother You. I think that was like a really well made film. So I was pretty excited for this one. I think it's like one that I was really, really excited about, because I really do love Boots Riley. So um but yeah, I think it's great. I think it has a really good absurdist and surreal approach that is very eye catching. And it's sort of like reminiscent of like a lot of like French filmmaking from back in the day. Like there's like times I'm like watching it's like this could have been made by George Méliès or something. When you're like
Mm.
watching this, like there's such a quality to like the production design and the costume design. I mean, it all has character. Like you get such a sense of style and a sense of like personality with this film. And which is what Boots Riley does very well. He's like the absurdist approach feels very inspired, but it's also like fits in very well with like sort of the dilemmas that these characters are going through. It's like you're sort of going through uh a maze that is like happens to be a replica. It's like it's insane like how well everything is done. And I think everything that is meant to be said about it is like translated very nicely. Um, so I mean, if I did have issues, there are times where it could throw so much at you that could be overwhelming, and it does have some common cliches. But honestly, I think the style is effective enough to forgive it. It's like really well done. So
I thought this was great. I agree. I really like Boots Riley. Same thing with you. Sorry to Bother You is really really entertaining, and it has a lot to say. To I'm Virgo is also it's a good show. I'm trying to remember anything that really stood out, but it's very conceptual, and that's one thing I like about Riley is that he's very out of the box with his ideas to the point where his commitment to surrealism is so extreme that it could throw someone off for just how wild it gets. Like we think about surrealism in a way where compare when we look at a Boots Riley film, other filmmakers seem more reserved with their surrealism, which says a lot. And with I Love Boosters, he does follow that route. This is only his second film, and it does have a lot of similar thematic concepts in terms of how it explores just modern day when it comes to economics and class, and particularly in this one, it's capitalism is a big thing with like just the job market too, and how the production of products that are meant to cater to a wealthier clientele and in like that production for its like international markets, and also the the class disparity that comes with that. These are obviously the topics that are talked about all the time in the news, and yet they still not go unaddressed, but we just sort of like, oh yeah, it happens, but we accept it. And this is an example of a film where it kind of questions, why do we accept it, but it's playing it with it in such a off the wall fun way. And the best thing about the way this film handles the absurdities too is that there are some with the characters and just the, in some cases, ignorance too, more from like the rich elites looking down on the lower class. Just that gap disparity almost is just so over the top and comical. But then when you reflect upon it in a real world setting, you realize like, wait, no, this is just real life. And why are we accepting this? And I think that's what really makes the film work, especially with the comedy as well, is like you're kind of laughing at yourself in some cases where it's just like, yeah, why is this going on still? And I think it does a really good job with creating really likable characters. I love the cast in the film. There's just this beautiful energy that all the actors bring out. And the best thing too is that even though this is a film about fashion and sort of like the factory industry and stuff too, it's so colorful and just lively. Just the way the colors pop from the frame are really, really pleasing to the eye, and just how wacky the costumes are. Like, it's a flexible reality in that way. And for what I recall, that's kind of how Sorry to Bother You is like as well. But this really goes over the moon with that. And it goes to show also, man, so many films today are so just boring and drab. And here's something that's so extravagant that makes you realize like, man, we need to use the color spectrum better in films nowadays, or just at least brighten the saturation, because man, I just love how the world looks in this film. It's kind of like, it's almost like a Hodorowski film, like The Holy Mountain, or just how over the top the color is. But yeah, it's really cool to see this film. It's been out for a while too, and I kind of wish it did a little better in the following weekends. But it's nice that we have this sort of, I would say it had a $20 million budget, sort of like a mid-budget indie film, like not low budget, but also it's not like $100 million. Like, it's a good in between where it might not make its money back right away, but with the VOD sales, like it'll find an audience and it'll make some profit, but it's also not over the top where it's like, oh, this will guarantee to be a bomb, basically. So yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean, I think back to like the whole style of the film when it comes to just like the color, like, yeah, the color just pops. I think it's something that really drives your eye, and I think it's actually very smart on how, there is a way to like say once you're in like a colorful room, it is easy to sort of like, get lost in it, because, there's a thing in like photography, and it's also used in film, called eye trace, where you're trying to get a sense of like, what you're supposed to be looking at, what the characters are supposed to be looking at. And this film, like, despite being surrounded by so much color, you get such a good sense of like space and like where characters are and what they're doing. So it's really smart in like how it uses that color, and you just like, it's just so vibrant. It's like, you can't look away from it, but it's also like the production design. Too. I think the one thing I really enjoy about this film is when Demi Moore, who sort of plays like this like an Anna Winter sort of villain in some cases, where it's, somebody who's like super pretentious and super out of touch with the rest of society, that, she's not realizing that her whole like brand is sinking, is literally like walking on a like a tilted building. And she's just so comfortable like walking on this like uneven ground, and like is able to sort of handle like, just like the fact that her image is sort of like deteriorating in like the public eye, that she's just like sort of like used to like this type of critique. Well, you sort of see like, Kiki Palmer sort of like come into that room, and she is unable to like, stand on the same ground that she is, because she is not on the level that she is initially. At least that's what the film is trying to like say with that visual metaphor. And it's like she doesn't want to fall into the same trap that she does. And it's really impressive like how that production design sort of just like translates. You could just read a lot into it. And like it's very like reminiscent of like, like early French expressionist films. But it is done so cleverly that it's really hard not to like admire it in that way. And I think it really just shows like, how the absurdist approach really makes this film work, because like, yeah, there's a lot of weird shit that happens, but it's like I can't help but not be engaged with it. It's like I am super tuned in to what's going on and what these characters are going through. And it's like also a very strong critique sort of on materialism in that
Mhm.
way, and sort of temptation. Especially with the Lakeith Stanfield character, who just sort of comes off as a very desperate Romeo type guy. Um, but you sort of like realize where it's like, the temptations of like, being attracted to this level of fashion, even if it's like really expensive, like, is real for a lot of people. It's like, you say like, "Oh, I can't survive without my favorite without if I don't get this like shirt or whatever." But this shirt is like a $500 Gucci shirt. It's like you kind of realize like how materialism is such like a attractive thing, and you just kind of see our main characters sort of fall into that trap as well. Like I think I love that whole visual metaphor of like this rolling ball of like insecurities and financial debt that's like chasing her. And it's really clever in like how it's sort of like using that as like sort of metaphor. It's like, all your like misgivings and misdeeds with like, trying to obtain this fashion is building up these anxieties. 'Cause it's not making you like it's not putting you in a better place, but it's like it's like you're burying yourself in all this clothing that really isn't worth as much as you think it's worth. And it's really impressive like how it sort of like critiques that level of like materialism, and how we as like humans get really attracted to certain things and certain types of materials without realizing that, yeah, does actually irreparable harm, not to just one person, but to a whole group of people. Like it's really impressive like how the visual commentary, like the social commentary, stands out visually. It's like a really good use of the mise en scène.
Yeah, it's interesting how the production design metaphorically plays into that surrealism too, because I think a lot of people might dismiss this as just, oh, why are these random things happening, like the ball rolling down the hill or Demi Moore's office being tilted, as you said. It's just weird for the sake of being weird. And the style is so loaded and extreme that it could lead you to think that. But if you really sit and digest the themes, you realize that all of these visual metaphors are are hidden in plain sight all throughout the film, and I really find that admirable about Boots Riley's work. And I don't know if there's like a consensus on what people think about his style, but I could see some people saying he's not very subtle. And I agree. I Love Boosters is not a particularly subtle film, but it almost works in that way where the lack of subtlety makes the message all the more clear because it's right in our face. We witness all these problems in broad daylight when we don't even really necessarily bat an eye, and it just goes down a direction that is way more surreal and especially when we get into that like weird portal device where they're like stealing the clothes or traveling from, I assume that it's like takes place in Oakland, California, to like the China factory or something. It's just, it really goes out there. And like that whole sequence is just pure fun, honestly. Just when I realized like that's what the movie was leading up to, I was like, oh, this is way more unexpected than I even thought going into it, knowing Boots Riley's style, because the advertising really didn't lean into that. It was really just establishing, oh yeah, the boosters, they steal all of like Demi Moore's lines of clothing. And that was really it. It didn't really lead into like what else entail, but then yeah, it gets into that. And then like, what was all the stuff with spoilers? I guess I should have prefaced that.
Yeah. So yes, just
for how
spoilers. Yeah.
Yeah, spoilers for all the boosters and how just like freaking weird this movie gets. The whole stuff with like Don Cheadle and the aliens too.
That was hilarious.
I was like, what is happening?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like, I think it's like, it's interesting. I think that's like part of the film that I'm trying to like still get like a grasp on, is like the whole $100,000 suits, and but in actuality they're actually like skin suits. And I think it was like initially supposed to be like how, controlled like that whole like group was, that Don Cheadle was running, where it's like, oh yeah, it's a social group. It's like, we're all supposed to like be agree, we're gonna try to find ways to fight the system, but you then figure out that the reason they have those suits is because like, Christy, who is Demi Moore's character, like is wanting them to wear them and try to like give like those who are against like, her whole image, like, this sort of like facade, I guess, where it's like, they're like, oh yeah, you're supporting this group, but in actuality you're not. It's like, it's sort of like, we were sort of talking about it earlier, but it's like how like you see these corporations during Gay Pride Month or whatever, where it's like, yeah, we're supporting it, but in actuality, what are you doing to actually support it? So it's like, and it's a very interesting like, analogy, um, on how that's like supposed to be used, and at least that's what I'm thinking as I'm like trying to reinterpret it. But it is like really impressive in how it just sort of unfolds, and you sort of like realizing like that's the style just purely comes to life, because like this is probably some of the best like stop motion visual effects I've ever seen in a live action film in quite some time. Um, it's like the stop use of claymation and stop motion, and you just like seeing how these like characters like who are in the skin suits sort of like running around, and it's really impressive like in how it's all done. Because it sort of comes off like it's a surrealist Looney Tunes cartoon at times, but that's kind of the joy of it. I mean, I think the one scene I really enjoyed was like watching the it's like they're using like this sort of like it's like a transporter or something, and but it's they use it, and they realize that it could be used to like deconstruct and reconstruct stuff, and like they transform like one of these police vehicles or whatever, and it happens to be Eric Andre like inside of a police tank, and it's like it's hilarious. Like it's really hilarious like how it all unfolds, and just like how that machine can sort of like amplify and de-amplify things. It's hilarious, and just like seeing also like how you see like those like trucks go up the escalator inside of a mall. It's like it's such surrealist imagery, but it's hard not to like be engrossed in it.
Yeah, I love the use of miniatures in that scene. It's very it doesn't even try to hide the artifice of it, which I think also kind of plays into the what you were saying, the whole material obsession of just people in general. Just like when we do an action scene, we're not even going to try and be realistic. You could see the fact that it's a fake mall, a toy car basically, and the actors are green screened in like it's the Amazing Bulk or something, but it really works in the film's favor, not only just because it's clever and subversive to see an action scene done that cheaply in a theater, but also kind of what you're saying about the commentary. It just shows, yeah, this obsession of materialism, like physical objects, personal garments too. It's all loaded onto there, and it it's also just kind of fun too. It brings this sense of joy and whimsy watching, especially those scenes where you could tell the craft that went to it, all the people who designed those models, and just how do we do a big scale scene like this on a low budget. It kind of reminded me of Hundreds of Beavers, or even in some sequences in Nirvana, the band, the show, the movie, or just the commitment to that is what brought this level of joy out of it. Even little things like not even action scenes, but the whole fashion show that Chrissy throws on near the end where it's that rainbow runway, like something about the way the compositing is done, it doesn't look perfect, but it doesn't need to look perfect because that adds into Riley's styles. So it's one of the rare times where the inherent phoniness of it made it better, and it would not have been as effective if it had $50 million just dedicated to VFX. Like the limitations became strengths in this film.
Yeah, and it's also like you could sort of like read, especially with that rainbow runway and like just sort of the fakeness of it all,
Yeah.
because obviously the film is like trying to lead you into sort of like this fake mentality that Christy Smith has about fashion, and it's like, oh yeah, this is like genuine art I'm creating or whatever, but it's like it's just showing so out of touch this character really is, even to the point like that the setting around her is very out of touch with actual reality. So it's like it's really well done in that regard. Like I just really enjoy like, and I guess it was supposed to be like some sort of homage to like the Wiz's, like the production design in the Wiz
Oh, it does look like The
semi-Lumet film.
Wiz.
Yeah, like almost looks
Oh,
like,
that's a good comparison. Yeah.
yeah, it almost looks like the production design in that film. And no, I don't think it's like a very good movie, but I could understand like, you know, why it has the cult following, why it's such a big deal um among like, you know, the community, and how it like manages to portray like, you know, some pretty real truths. But I really enjoy like that production design and how it's like just used, like it feels very out of this world in some cases. Like it's great. Like, man, I just very love like, it's just probably one of the most like best looking like low budget films I think I've seen in like quite some time. It's crazy. So
Yeah. And it's also nice how when it comes to the humor to kind of going into the surrealism, it doesn't feel like this is just like low random. Look at how wacky it is. I think there is more intent to it just because it's really just picking apart, especially the rich and upper class societies. Like, look at how out of touch you are. Look at how moronic you look when you actually explain this stuff, or how you're handling your company. Like, it really points a finger in that direction and just like totally strips away the mask. And it's interesting how we still it does go into also just sort of like the like worker strikes too, unionization as well. It handles a lot, and you could tell that Boots Riley, he really has his opinion and his things to say, and he's not afraid to put that into the film. It's not like you sense that he's sugarcoating any of his thoughts, and he's very active online with that as well, to the point where it might, I don't think this movie is offensive in any way, but it's clear if you don't share necessarily the similar viewpoint, it could come off as a bit off-putting, but it doesn't even seem that malicious too. This is not a propaganda piece in any way. It's just showing someone's personal perspective and informing that into a way that almost any audience could at least understand, to the point, even if they don't agree, they recognize, okay, you're playing with this in a surreal, over-the-top fashion that it comes off as satire. And so, not that that's a get out of jail free card, but it is smartly written in that way where he can get his opinion out there, but also not feel like he's going to get backlash in return.
yeah, and the thing is, it's like I like I said, this like I said, he's very reminiscent of like Spike Lee in terms of just like how he does approach that commentary. But I think obviously it's a little much more absurdist compared to like
Mm-hmm.
how Lee sort of uses his style. Um, so but I do think like, the commentary is very effective. I think one other scene that felt pretty effective to me was it's the scene with Isa Gonzalez, and she receives her paycheck from one of the metro designer stores she's working at. And get
Mhm.
Will Poulter's character, is sort of just seeming like this, very like just as out of touch as Christie is. But you kind of realize how much of a shill he sort of is. Like,
Yeah,
it's like, hey, why aren't you paying
a
us this
bootlicker.
much? And it's like he's like, oh no, this is the way things are supposed to be. We are promoting products. It's like, yeah, but you're not explaining why you're not paying me. So it's like you're kind of like realizing like how, you know, out of touch, like, some bits of capitalism are when it comes to like, this type of worker disparity. Like, there is like a lot of truths that happen, unfortunately, in this country. I don't know if you remember the documentary, The Alabama Solution from last year,
Yeah,
where it's like basically they're having like prisoners who, are trying to reform themselves, like work, and they're like having them work like slave wages. Like they're not, it's like money that's like, not, can't even get you like a decent meal at McDonald's. It's like, it is something that is unfortunately true in this society, especially if like, a lot of corporations and businesses sort of like underpaying people, um but overpaying themselves in the process. It's so I think of like, he is tapping on very real issues, and especially if like,
of
the way
course. Yeah,
things are sort of going on right now in terms of like the job market, it is feeling that real for a lot of people. So I think, this film, I think, did come out at the right time for like, as this stuff was happening, because it does bring attention to like, yeah, these people who you think are working like really excellent jobs and part of like a giant corporation are like not getting paid these fair wages. It's like it is a truth. It is a truth that's
yeah,
happening pretty often.
yeah. I don't know how long this film was in development for, but you could sense that he had like a finger on the pulse where he knew something by the time the film would come out. The overall economy, or just in general, just the job market overall, would have shifted, because obviously it's no secret the job market is really bad right now, and just the fight for better wages, better, more opportunities too. That is also evident in the film as well. So to see this film come out at this time makes it all the more special, I think, too, just because it does really tap in on that. But the fact that it's not a documentary either can bring people in and get more. I don't know about more engaged, but they'll come away with it in a way. It's like, okay, we're watching this as a work of narrative fiction, but like all the best types of social commentaries or comedic satires, how can we reflect on real life today through either through a fictional fantastical lens, or in this case absurdism. And yeah, he's just very good at that. So
Yeah, he's very awesome. Also, like the music from Tune Yards, like
yeah.
there are times where like you could maybe it is a like Wes Anderson coded, but honestly, like it's very well done. I mean, I think there is probably a lot of style that Riley might have took from like, the Grand Budapest Hotel or French Dispatch or whatever. But I do think that the music like actually fits into like the sort of energy that this film's bringing across. Like it leans heavily into that absurdism. It sort of sounds like the music you would hear in like maybe like a Dr. Seuss book, like whenever you're like reading it.
Yeah.
Like, or like when you're like thinking of like Dr. Seuss music, you're sort of like thinking like, wow, this is like very jumpy in some cases. Like, it is sort of like seeming like the live action kind of hat in some cases. And I mean that in a good way. I don't think Cat in the Hat's a good movie, but I mean like in terms of just how there is such, you could just see it's like the production design and the costumes are sort of like breathing this level of like, Dr. Seuss level, pastiche, but it's using it in a way that's actually really smart. Like it actually like it makes me like think about like how Boots Riley sort of like seeing these like this material and this like antagonist and this sort of like has somebody like, yeah, you're basically acting like a Dr. Seuss character right now.
Hmm.
So it is so it does basically like let rest on its laurels that way. So it's awesome.
Yeah. At times it does feel like a live action Looney Tunes cartoon, more particularly with the comedy. But even since that, with how just some Looney Tunes cartoons, I unfortunately don't have any examples off the top of my head, how they managed to act as not only a piece of entertainment, but also like a reflective fable for the era that it came out
Hmm.
in a way. It's just
Yeah.
it evokes that charm and
Yeah. I guess I'm
that charm and intelligence, basically.
yeah, I guess I'm thinking of fuck, I have it on top of my head. I think it's like one of the best Looney Tunes cartoons ever made. It's the Dover Boys. Like
Oh, the Dover Boys.
yeah, like sort of like how that's sort of like a commentary on the gay 90s trope. I'm still not finished with that marathon. um it's gonna be a while. But but yeah, it also sort of leans into like the Chuck Jones absurdism a little bit.
Yeah,
Like I guess I could think
yeah,
about
like Duck Amuck.
Duck Amuck or just like this one with it's like a cat running in a checkered house. I forgot the name of it. But it's
Oh,
like, yeah, it's leaning into like more of a Chuck Jones absurdist approach in some cases, but it's using it in a way where it's like, okay, yeah, you can understand what it's saying about the time period right now, but it's like doing so in a way that is like entertaining and is, not afraid to like, really let loose. It's really awesome.
yeah.
Do you have anything else to say on I
I,
Love Boosters or?
no, I mean, I really really liked it, and I'm glad to see Boots Riley's getting more work because it's been a while since Sorry to Bother You came out. So he had a pretty decent. Well, he did I Am Virgo in between, but still the good amount of time between films, and it's nice to see that he takes his time. He doesn't just like rush it out. You could tell that there was a lot of intent and thought that went into the film, and I think it I think it worked really well. It's very funny. It's very smart, and its surrealism adds to the overall commentary, and it makes you think more about the issues it's laying out in front of you. I think if it were taken or not taken, if it was played a little more grounded in a realist fashion, it would not have the same impact. Like I think the movie would still work because the script is strong, but that added level of absurdism really brings out the best qualities of the material. So yeah, I think it's really great, and I would give it an 8 out of 10.
Yeah, I actually really love this movie. I mean, I was really excited about Boots Riley coming back with another film. Since it has been so long since Sorry to Bother You. And yeah, I mean, I can understand like, it could be off-putting for some and what it's talking about could maybe hit a little too close to home, but it's doing so in the right way. I mean, it comes in with the right amount of absurdism, of really excellent production design and style and costumes. It's like it really creates a world of its own that somehow feels very reflective to our world right now. And it is complemented further by some pretty excellent performances, really good music. I really enjoy a lot of the VFX and the stop motion animation that's used in this film. It's just something that honestly has to be seen. And yeah, just lived up to my expectations. I was very excited for this film, and yeah, it's definitely a very exciting film to watch. So yeah, I certainly give this one like a 9 out of 10. I think that's how I pretty much feel about it. But and I know for some people it might be a lot, but I don't know. I think it deserves it. So it's awesome. But yeah, I love boosters. I love boosters. Huh. So we're into your host direct now, and yeah, I think we're gonna have a pretty good conversation about this. Probably more than the first one we talked about, but yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So in celebration, in quotes, in celebration of Mandalorian and Grogu, I decided to pair it with another Star Wars project, and one that has so much to talk about in ways that are both for better and for worse. And I'm sure there are no shortage of opinions on this film in any direction, but I recommended Star Wars: The Last Jedi, which was the second film in this Disney's sequel trilogy, which came out in 2017. So we're nearing 10 years on this film, which is pretty crazy because it just seems like with all the conversation surrounding it, this film has been around for decades almost. Basically, it picks off where Force Awakens left off, where Rey goes out to seek Luke Skywalker to train her to become a Jedi. Meanwhile, Poe Dameron and Finn are working with General Leia or Princess Leia to defend the First Order, which came back, and I guess they just want to destroy the Resistance again. So, yeah, I have a very interesting history with this film. I'm sure you probably do as well, but let's just not beat around the bush. This film was, you could not say a thing about The Last Jedi online without a million comments being directed towards you. Even if you breathe and somehow out of your breath you mentioned The Last Jedi, you just, all eyes went on you. It was just an absolute firestorm of content that many Star Wars fans were very, very disappointed and very angry at this film for how it ruined the lore, supposedly acting as if what George Lucas wrote in 1977 was like the equivalent of the Ten Commandments or the Bible or whatnot. It was absurd. And at the same time, there are people that really love this film for how subversive and risk-taking it was. And I remember when I saw the film on opening night, I loved it, but I was definitely still riding on the Star Wars high because when the sequel trilogy first came out, or at least Force Awakens, that's in a way reignited my love of Star Wars, because I wasn't really a Star Wars kid growing up. I had seen the original trilogy, but I didn't watch the prequels. I didn't watch any of the shows. But when Force Awakens came out, that brought a new level of appreciation for it. So when Last Jedi came out, I adored it. Honestly, I'm not ashamed to say that, but it was clear it was just because I was still just hyped for Star Wars. And then after hearing a lot of the discourse, I rewatched it before Rise of Skywalker came out, and I thought it was garbage. I remember I just absolutely hated it. And I hadn't seen it since rewatching it for this podcast. And I thought it would be good to recommend because it's been so long now. We could just talk about it as a film. And weirdly now, as an adult watching this and after studying a lot of nostalgia and personal research in school, I have a very interesting shift in opinion where my rating and overall consensus is actually fairly similar, but my reasons for liking and disliking it have almost entirely flipped. Because when the last rewatch that I had, I hated it because of the lore changes and the mythology changes. Now I actually really appreciate how, we didn't even mention this was directed and written by Rian Johnson, and I just admire how confident he was with this film. Like, he was not afraid to totally subvert the expectations of the fans and just not giving them what they wanted, essentially. He was smart to know that if you want a franchise like Star Wars to have longevity, things needed to change. You need to forget about the past in some way. And this film actively throws that all away because it really goes to show that, yeah, sometimes the past needs to die in order for a legacy to live on. And it especially does that with the franchise characters that we all know and love, like Luke and Leia, and bringing that in with the new characters, establishing what can we learn from the past to prevent something like what happened in the original trilogy happen. And that, to see Disney make that decision with a brand as impactful and as popular as Star Wars is insanely impressive. My problem with the film, however, is that thematically and conceptually what it explores is genuinely fascinating. However, from a narrative standpoint, it is borderline incompetent because it seems like the film is just strung together by all these random scenes there's so many characters in this film and there's not a lot of great development and the tone is all over the place. So it is really is the definition of a mixed bag in my opinion, because there is stuff in this film that I'm unashamed to say that I love. But there's also some stuff that I find so frustrating and annoying to sit through that it actively destroyed what could have been a really great film. And honestly, the biggest fault of the film was the fact that the fans' very visceral reaction to the film has ultimately shifted the tide of the representation of nostalgia in the American blockbuster, which I believe has been for the worse, because the way the film subverts it could have led to a very interesting direction for legacy sequels and franchises. But because the fans hated it, we went down the route of just, I'll give them what they want with no nuance. So I definitely have a lot more to say about this, but what did you think?
Yeah. So unlike you, still sort of am. I am a Star Wars nerd. Not the level of nerd that, is going to be complaining on forums about who shot first. Like, if we're being honest, it's probably one of the most stupidest fan complaints you will ever see. Like, oh, I want Han Solo's character. It's like, oh, fuck you. It's just a dumb edit. Like, I don't think that really matters quite as much, in my opinion. Bite me, Star Wars fans. But yeah, I grew up on the original trilogy. My dad still does have copies, like at least on VHS of the original trilogy before the special editions.
Nice, same.
Yeah, so I actually do want to go over to his place sometime and try to, convert those into DVDs. But I love the original trilogy. I grew up on the prequel trilogy, like, most of this generation did. And yeah, the prequel trilogy had its issues, but, I still think there is a little bit of value. And especially after Clone Wars, the TV show came out, both versions, like they actually had a version by the guy who directed the Samurai Jack episodes, and
yeah,
that was pretty freaking awesome. Like, hey, Samurai Jack and Star Wars, that's a good mix. And yeah, of course, the Dave Filoni and George Lucas produced CG animated show, which is also really good. And but that was pretty much Star Wars for a while, because after Revenge of the Sith, pretty much it was just the Clone Wars and nothing else. They had the Clone Wars movie, which was very stupid of them to try to release to theaters, but because it was just a TV movie, it honestly just should have stayed as a episode of a show, but it didn't for some reason. And I saw that on my birthday. I remember that. I dragged my family to it begrudgingly. But yeah, for a while that was Star Wars, and then Force Awakens comes out, and that was like an event. That was something that was really exciting. And I think, although I do have problems with The Force Awakens, I think it was more or less Disney trying to prove that, okay, we can do a Star Wars film. We understand, like, what goes into making these films good. We're gonna try to, like, erase the mistakes of the prequel trilogy. We're gonna try to, bring something that is reminiscent of the original trilogy, and we're gonna do something that is gonna please fans and critics, and it worked. Like, people loved it. I remember the day when the Critics' Choice Awards nominations came out, and they somehow nominated it for Best Picture, despite the fact that the film was not even out
really?
yet. So, yeah, I remember that. And so I was very excited for The Last Jedi. And admittedly, it was almost 10 years ago now. Like, it's insane. But I remember walking into the theater, and I remember being super challenged by it. And I was like, oh my god, I can't believe this is such a good movie, and I wonder what everybody else is gonna think. And then I'd see the whole shitstorm online the next day, of people just like criticizing the hell out of it. Because like and it was very mixed. Like that, the reactions were
Mhm.
very mixed. People were like, "Oh, the lore is ruined now," or like, Ryan Johnson does not know what he's doing. And it's like I was like, no. I mean, he clearly does know what he's doing. I mean, he's taking a risk with source material that honestly should have been challenged a long time ago. I mean, the thing about Star Wars is like Star Wars is not sacred text.
No.
It's never been that way. As much as the fans want you to believe that it is, like, oh, everybody has to follow the A canon, the B canon, like, shut the fuck up. I mean, I mean, and trust me, I have more of those for these incels. Don't you worry. You guys are gonna get ready to type. But I really, the thing is, it's like Ryan Johnson knew what he was doing. And, these films were never sacred text. George Lucas never made these films as sacred text. He just wanted pure entertainment when these came out. I mean, he even admitted himself, like, Star Wars is for kids, you know? But, obviously it's proven to be much more than for kids. I mean, I think there is a value in a lot of stuff that it was intended for kids, but, obviously a lot of people do take out a lot out of it. I mean, there is such a lore with this franchise. There is such a level to everything that's going on. I mean, you could interpret the Force in any way you can. I mean, people can interpret. I mean, it was inspired by Taoism, so
Mhm.
it is something that resonated with a lot of people, even to the point there's a freaking Jedi religion in the state. I can't believe it. But so yeah, it's not never been sacred text, and I think Ryan Johnson knew that. And to be honest, I think he was the right filmmaker to try to do that because he is able to be bold and audacious with some of the films he made before, like Looper. And
Mhm.
I do appreciate what he did. I think there is a good message about letting the past die and letting it sort of like and moving on to create new different directions that are still rooted in the past but not as tied to the past as they once were. um and I think that's like something I appreciate a lot about this film when it came out. And honestly, I still do. I think I'm one of the very brave defenders on this film. um just because, like, honestly, this is what Star Wars needed for a while. It needed a challenge. Like, it's okay to, like, have change. It's okay to, like, do something different from the norm. Obviously, you got to keep things in place in terms of continuity and, like, other stuff, but because, that stuff still matters because you don't want to try to, like, reinvent it into something completely different. I mean, it's not it's not like, something where you can just like change a shirt from the cover of white to the cover of red by putting a sock in the dryer. But it is something where it's like if you're able to like do it right, like you could create something that actually could be meaningful to a lot of people. And to be honest, like I did not mind the direction this film was going. I did not mind the arcs that Luke went through and Ray and Kylo. I mean, I think those are clearly the best parts of this film. But I think this is what makes the film work. It's like that message really is something Star Wars should embrace. New creative avenues, new creative paths for these characters to go on. We don't need to be tied to Skywalkers or Palpatines or Solos. It's like it's more about building our own paths, and that's one thing that's one thing I always take away from this film. No, it has issues. I'm
Yeah.
not going to act like this film is flawless, and I'm pretty sure we're going to dive into those issues.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
I don't think the film is like the worst thing ever, as those incels are saying they are.
Yeah. It I find that response fascinating because I remember I don't even remember who the YouTuber was, but there was this like 4 hour long review of The Last Jedi. It wasn't from Mahler. It was from some other dude. and he just ripped into it. Clearly, he was a big fan of the original trilogy. And like, here's the thing. The people that are mad about this film, I don't doubt that they are very passionate Star Wars fans. Like, they love what they love. But at the same time, when I hear stuff saying like The Last Jedi is the worst Star Wars film, it absolutely destroyed the lore, there's no entertainment value at all, I'm just like, did you watch The Phantom Menace? Did you watch Attack of the Clones? Like, come on. Like, I understand that people say that George Lucas, at least with the prequels, or he planned it out from the start, which is one of the big sticking points of the sequel trilogy, that they had no roadmap from the start. And I think they were more confident in Rian Johnson to spearhead the next Star Wars trilogy, which I don't even think that's happening anymore at this rate. But when I hear people say that, I'm just like, how, like, I'm trying to think of how I even word this, but like, how much of like a glazer are you of George Lucas to be like, you will not accept any ounce of change? I think that's what frustrates me about the fan response, is that like, yeah, if I were a fan of something, would I be annoyed seeing Luke represented this way? Maybe I probably would for, I don't know, a few seconds. But when I take into account that this is an evolution of the mythology, and clearly Rian Johnson had an idea from the start of, this is a whole thing about letting the past die and realizing that like the regret and the guilt that we hold on to leading to the rise of even more consequences. Like, I understand where he was coming from, especially with Luke's character. And I know people say like, oh, Luke isn't like that. George Lucas didn't write him to be that way, as if they're saying George Lucas was like Jesus or something. It's just absolutely absurd, the response to that. And I think if there's something that the film really worked in that regard, was just how, like I said, it was confident to do that, but it just seems like, the weird thing is that Disney allowed him to do this in this manner, but it also didn't seem like they were that confident in the response either, because if they were really confident with this, they probably would have had a roadmap plan from the start. Either have J.J. Abrams do The Force Awakens, then have Rian Johnson do episode 8 and episode 9 to sort of fill it out. And they even dance around some of those ideas too, because the whole thing about this film too is it leans a lot into Rey's parents, or like her heritage, I guess, which they kind of like dance around the entire time. Just like, even in dialogue, there's lines where Kylo Ren's just like, oh, you're something about like your parents, like it hurts you, it haunts you, implying that, okay, they're leaving the door open where they can just write in whatever nonsense it would be to be like, okay, this is what he was talking about. And yet in The Rise of Skywalker, they went down the dumbest route imaginable by making her a Palpatine. It's like, you could, if there was more confidence in the story and they had a better plan with the narrative from the start, I think the film would have improved, because as the narrative stands, it does seem like a bunch of scenes. It almost has like a Two Towers level structure where all the characters are on their own little adventures, basically. But it's not like they're weaving into them very much. It just seems like hard cutting from left to right. Because I think the stuff with Luke and Rey and Kylo is the most interesting element of the film. And then the other part, you have Poe trying to, I guess, not take control, but maintain a sense of like leadership against, the Laura Dern character, which that was another can of worms that people absolutely loved. And then you got Finn with Rose, another character that people absolutely loved, and going on that little side quest. And I feel like with that one, the latter two, it should have been swapped almost, because the whole thing that people say is that Finn doesn't do anything in the trilogy, which he really doesn't. And having him with Rose it just felt like it was wasting a lot of time. And it almost seemed like Johnson was most interested in Rey, Luke, and Kylo, but for some reason didn't think there was enough story there to make that a full movie. And yeah, there's other characters, but it just seemed like the film is too overstuffed and it didn't know how to weave itself through the structure, because as it is, it just doesn't flow very nicely. And it's not like the film drags either. Like, I was surprised that the film is 2.5 hours long. It doesn't feel that long, but I think because I'm more interested in what it's exploring conceptually is what kind of gets me through it, because as is, the dialogue is crap, honestly. it just over explains and oversimplifies all these dense concepts into just these little, like, with the, I guess, the IQ of, I don't know, like middle schoolers, I guess. It weirdly talks down to the audience, thinking like, oh, you're not smart enough to get this. But it's like, no, I kind of understand what you're doing here. I wish I wrote down some of the lines, because there was just somewhere, I
How
don't
can you
know.
keep fighting the people you hate when you're fighting for the ones you love?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great example, and not even like what's it? It was Kylo that said, "Let the past die, kill it if you have to." That is honestly the entire thesis of the film, and that's not. That's where the lines where it's so on the nose that it really, really works and shows like, yeah, this is directed towards the fans entirely. Just like, sometimes you need to just let it go pretty much and allow for change and interpretation to happen, which cool. I like that. But at the same time, it still tries to balance this really serious, deeply not philosophical, but just trying to be dense with the themes with awful humor too. Like, the humor in this film is terrible. I hate the humor in the movie because it's never funny. It grinds the movie to a halt. And Star Wars films in general, they're not Mel Brooks comedies, but they have good banter, and especially in the original trilogy, there's a lot of that. But here, it's like the worst type of Marvel humor, where it grinds to a halt. It's not really entertaining, and you could tell when there's scenes that were not shoehorned, but you can almost sense the presence of the execs breathing down Ryan's shoulder, being like, oh yeah, we gotta sell more merch. You know, we gotta like draw some more attention to those porgs, or Luke drinking the milk from that weird creature. So it's too much, honestly. And that little things like that, which don't seem that bad in concept, just the way they're executing the film just really take away from, honestly, the good material. So it's funny how it sounds like I'm really hardcore defending the film, but even then, my overall rating is that I just think it's still hard to defend, because I don't love the film really. I struggle to call it great because there's so much stuff that really bogs it down.
Yeah, and the thing is, I don't think it's like a great movie. Because yeah, it has those flaws that you explained. Like, the dialogue is incredibly clunky and definitely feels a little too on the nose of what it's trying to do. And outside of Luke, Ray, and Kylo, it's like the other characters are not really given much to do, and it's like, fuck, I gotta give them something to do. And the whole scheme of it, it makes their arcs feel rather pointless at the end of the
Yeah.
day. Because like it's like, the thing is, like, their arcs are probably the most like aggravating part about this movie, Finn and Poe's. Because Finn doesn't really go through that much of a change. I know Finn has always sort of been like a little bit of a fish out of water character, where, you know, he's just somebody who's sort of out of his element. He's sort of in his head being involved with the resistance. And so, like, you know, he is sort of, you sort of got to give him something to do, because obviously his main quest is to find Rey, wonder where she is, hope she's going to get back okay. Because, you know, that was a strong part of like like The Force Awakens. Is like, there was a strong relationship between both Finn and Rey. And there was a good camaraderie, like, you know, between him and Poe, which, you know, still works. I think the thing that you can give credit is that the actors, like the main actors at least, for the most part, give pretty solid performances. I think
Mm-hmm.
Mark Hamill probably gives his best as like a live action actor, in this film. I think he's playing the same character, but, you know, you do give a good sense that he's putting in a pretty dedicated performance, which is great. I mean, I think like all the actors do a pretty decent job, especially like, you know, the late Carrie Fisher, who died during the production of this film,
Yeah.
unfortunately. Like,
Oh, that hurts.
that is horrible. But you know, you do sense that there is passion there. But it's like, the thing is, it's like Finn and Poe just like, they just they go for the most like aggravating sequences imaginable, like the Canto Bite sequence.
Oh, I hate that
Yeah,
sequence.
I think that's like the one thing everybody agrees is like the worst part of this movie, and it is. I could see what Johnson is trying to do with it. I think, and it's actually one part of Star Wars that actually, if you're kind of thinking about the whole scheme of the saga, hasn't been explored that much. I mean, I guess the most you sort of get is like Phantom Menace with the Trade Federation, and maybe a little bit on Geonosis with the gladiator battles, but for the most part, you don't really get much of a gist of like the classism aspect when it
Hmm.
comes to the universe. And I could understand why Johnson included it. I mean, I think it is there are actually, admittedly, there are some smart elements in it. Like there's actually one part that I didn't think about watching the first time was where it was the Master Codebreaker, played by Benicio del Toro. He steals this casino ship. And I guess
Hmm.
like this before we jump into this, like spoilers here on out about the Last Jedi, we're gonna dive into this thing.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, he steals a ship from the casino, and he's basically like going through and robbing it, and like Finn's like, okay, how can you rob this thing? Like, what are you in it for? And then it's like, he goes through the history of the person who owned this ship, and he's selling, you know, weapons and ships to the First Order, but it also reveals that this person also sold weapons and ships to the Resistance, which it just kind of gives at least a little indication that this whole war was never black and white as we make it out to be. Just because, like, yeah, there's issues on both sides. I mean, Clone Wars should have explored it a little bit in one episode, but I'm getting at them. But yeah, that is like one aspect that does make the Canto Bite sequence a little more salvageable, but it still feels like a waste of time. There is some points of the visual effects in that sequence just don't look good. You could tell like they're
Yeah.
trying to hide the CGI with the lighting. And like that chase scene, and it's like those rabbit horses, whatever, just don't look realistic. And it's like, I don't know, like, I don't know, I was hearing like one where somebody say where it almost reminded them of the prequels, which I wouldn't say it does, but it
Uh.
does have elements, like,
Hmm.
so yeah, and it has issues, but then you learn that it leads basically to nowhere because Poe's arc
Yeah.
is just as aggravating
Um.
because initially he's like supposed like he's sort of put on like he's grounded, he's demoted, and so they have Laura Dern's Admiral Hodo character take over, while Leia's sort of like in a comatose state, and it's like the whole thing is aggravating because Hodo is just stubborn, and damn Poe is just stubborn, and it's like, oh yeah, you're gonna go to Canto Bight, gonna find the master code breaker, gonna do this stuff or whatever, and then Poe is gonna try to stall Admiral Hodo while they do that thing, and then you just sort of learn that like he tries to do a mutiny, he tries to take the ship, sacrifice himself, and then all of a sudden it's like Leia stuns him, and it turns out later it's like like, oh, it's a freaking like TV show lesson that Poe is supposed to learn. It's like it's that I think that to me that's a little more aggravating than Canto Bight because Canto Bight's just like boring, but like here it's just like it kind of made Canto Bight feel pointless, and it's like they could have found ways to actually you know make the characters do something without having to go into sequences like that. Like they could have put Fenn and Rose and Poe had them try to sneak onto the First Order ship to see if there's like a way to like you know kill the hyperdrive function or whatever. Like you didn't need to go for the whole master code breaker thing. You didn't need that because like it, and I think that would have made it more salvageable. That would have been a strong B plot to have, sort of like how how there was like the B plot in Empire Strikes Back, where Luke is on Dagobah and Han and Leia are trying to escape the Empire. Like they're honestly, they could. It's very simple, but it feels like Ryan Johnson was like sort of stuffing in that plot because he didn't know what to do with those characters.
I don't understand that, because it's clear he had almost like a carte blanche basically to explore almost whatever based on the ending of The Force Awakens too. So it's like, why did you go down this direction where it's just so overstuffed and kind of just nonsensical? I agree with what you're saying with the two subplots. Like the Finn and Rose subplot on Canto Bight is mostly, it's not even entirely pointless because it does play into the narrative, but it's just the execution. Like I actually really like that setting. It almost has that casino's like a James Bond, almost Casablanca type energy to it. But I agree, it just overall, like thematically, it explores an interesting part of the classism, but the execution is just very silly and over the top. That's one part. Yeah, with the CGI, I will say sorry, I'm like jumping all over the place. If there's one thing that I have always firmly believed about Star Wars The Last Jedi compared to anything else, even from day one when I saw it, this is the best looking Star Wars film. I think the cinematography is honestly, at points, phenomenal. Especially, we'll get to this later when they go on to the planet Crate, but even on the island where Luke is hiding out, I think that's like an Ireland island, and it's like really, really impressive. The rocks and just the setting. It was shot with an IMAX film camera, even though they didn't use the IMAX ratio. Like, so the film grain and the texture really pops in those scenes. It's gorgeous. And even the set design of Canto Bight was shot at Pinewood Studios, so they built that and it looks really lavish, but it's unfortunately ruined with what you said, the CGI, which at some points when Rose and Finn are riding on those creatures, it looks like the scene in Harold and Kumar when they're high out of their minds riding on the deer. It does. I was baffled, like, wow, this CGI looks terrible, and I do not understand why, because there's some cases where the CGI looks pretty freaking good, like the AT-AT walkers, for example, or even some of the opening action scene with the X-Wings. It's obviously digital, but it looks, especially for the time, it was pretty impressive. It's a little dated now, but it still looks good. And it just has a very inconsistent clash with the visual effects, which is weird because I don't remember that problem in Force Awakens. I haven't seen The Rise of Skywalker since theaters, and I want to forget that I saw that, but I don't remember the effects looking like that either. So it's just weird how this film has some of the best looking set pieces and vision and effects, and also some of the worst in this trilogy. And to go to the Poe and Holdo subplot, yeah, it's very much, what annoys me about that subplot is that it just seems like one track, one note for each characters, and it repeats 7 times until they realize, oh wait, yeah, let Poe do his thing, but then he gets zapped anyway. Like, I do not like the banter between the two because it's just the same conversation over and over. Poe's like, let me take control. You're leading the resistance essentially to suicide. And Hull's like, no, stand down. You're grounded, basically. And I know a lot of people, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but I remember a big sticking point for some fans of Star Wars was that they thought this movie was too woke. But honestly, that's not the issue, because I think with the Holdo character, there is something there where it talks about sort of the cowardice and sort of insecurities of leadership. Like, her plan is to basically get the resistance all onto the escape pods, but then that'll basically lead them open to enemy fire from the First Order. And that goes to show, it's like, yeah, it's not that she doesn't have a plan, but she's almost just so overwhelmed where it's just like, okay, we just need to do something, even if it puts everyone at risk. And that has nothing to do with gender politics. That's just an overall commentary on leadership, which is another interesting thing that Johnson is bringing into the material. You're looking at this in the most one-dimensional, like, bad faith way possible and not deriving the nuance from the scene. And that's what's bothersome also too with the execution, because it just comes off like that, where it's just repeating a lot of the same things over and over. And in a lot of ways too, the movie, what I find kind of interesting is that it does sort of commentate on just what does it mean to be a good guy and a bad guy in this universe, what you were saying with the code breaker, and also how Luke saw danger inside Ben Solo, even though that might have just been derived from his own insecurities and doubt too. And in a way, impulse can totally transform someone. We see how Ben is totally corrupted by that image of Luke in a way, and ultimately derives this hatred and showing like, yes, sometimes in his eyes, turning to the dark side is your ultimate liberation, essentially. But Rey ultimately sees the good in him in this supreme leader, pretty much like killing hundreds of people and just being a total, like, full totalitarian force. There is this interest. There's a lot of interesting dilemmas happening under the core of this borderline nonsensical story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's just like, 'cause you could tell there was like the story that Johnson gravitated toward a lot, and and I think it more or less because it's the thing I kind of like always thought about is like Johnson takes a huge risk with this whole film.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in the terms of how like he's trying to basically like, okay, we're gonna burn down the Jedi books, we're gonna show Yoda just trying to like literally strike a lightning bolt, and then boom, it's like all it's all burning. And we're gonna do some things that might piss people off, like the idea of Rey sort of being the daughter of basically a bunch of drunkards, like people that just did not care about her. And so, and we're also going to like kill Snoke off early. It's like, yeah,
Oh
it's
my God.
taking a lot of risks.
That's another
But
thing we'll talk about.
yeah, for sure. But I guess like the thing I do want to sort of like dive in a little bit on is just like, I could see what he was trying to do. And I actually, and to be honest, I didn't mind it that it would have gone this direction. Is that I do like the idea of Ray sort of coming from nothing. Like I'm not against
Mm-hmm.
what
Yeah.
because the thing is like I don't think everything needs to be connected like the MCU. You know, like we don't need that type of interconnection. And I get it's like Star Wars, like the lore needs to be accurate, but thing is, Ray is a new character. Like she's not a character that needed to be related to anybody. And to be honest, like those type I mean, it's like the reason why, but the first two seasons of The Mandalorian works so well because, Din Djarin's not like related to Boba Fett or Jango Fett in any way. He's practically his own character. Um, you know, I mean, Ahsoka Tano is not related to anybody in Star Wars. I mean, she's a new character technically. But the thing is, these characters can stand on their own without having to be so interconnected with, the overarching storylines of the previous trilogies. Like that's the thing that I don't mind with Ray because like okay the best heroes do come from nowhere. I mean I love underdog Rocky type stories.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't really have an issue with that. I don't have an issue with get the Jedi text getting burned like because it's honestly trying to create some new fresh directions. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not like it's trying to disregard the lore. It's not like it's trying to like say like, oh yeah, this lore is meaningless. It's trying to create something new with it. Um, I mean, I guess that's I don't mind these directions. I mean, I actually didn't really mind Snoke getting killed off so quickly, which I'm pretty sure you got things to talk
Hmm.
about with that. But like honestly, like to me, like I wouldn't have minded like seeing Kylo Ren sort of become the supreme leader, and at the end of the day, like it would have created much more of a dynamic villain to like really be intimidated by, but also feel for because yeah, he is related to like, the heroes. Like because the thing is it's like we don't need to like try to copy the original trilogy note for note. I mean, we had The Force Awakens for that. So like Brian Johnson was trying to separate, this like franchise from that trilogy. It's not an issue there. So and yeah, sure he took a lot of risks with it, and some of those risks like, I'll bet are a bit sloppy, but I could see where he was going, and honestly, I kind of wish it just kept going in those directions, you know?
Yeah. Luke almost acts like a stand-in for basically subverting any of the expectations that the fans had. Like there's that one part where um I think it was R2 who pulls out the older footage of Leia when she's like, "Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope." And then he literally goes, "That was a cheap move." Like he's literally telling to the audience, yeah, pandering to the nostalgia in this way, but just by pointing out references to the OG films is lazy and honestly not what we should be doing to satisfy the fans. We should in some way be encouraging some sort of challenge and nuance. And the whole idea of having Luke being the one to believe that the Jedi has to end is such a gutsy and ballsy move that I totally understand why at face value some people were upset about that. But if you're just that blinded to your nostalgia and to your fandom where you just don't want that change, like why are you even watching these new movies then? You should just rewatch the old ones and just don't even bother with anything new at that point. So that was another thing I wanted to talk about earlier. But the whole thing with Snoke, I got some things to say about Snoke. So first of all, this is the second movie in a row where we're covering Andy Serkis in motion capture, and I think the idea of Snoke has had a lot of potential, but I really wish he was not killed off in this film. And I know a lot of people say, "Oh, he should have been the main antagonist in The Rise of Skywalker." A part of me wants to say that because that would have made logical sense to have some sort of through line. But there could have been something else where maybe this would have been seen as kind of like pulling things out of thin air. But if he was killed early on, a la Sauron in the extended cut of Return of the King, then you could reveal a greater threat. Not freaking Palpatine, because that was lazy and stupid, but something else where either Kylo had to step in as the new Supreme Leader or there was some other antagonistic force, which I don't even know what they would have done at that point, given the not even poor, just the divided reception of this film. But I think just having him killed off so early was just not exciting because this is the first time we see Snoke in person, and we really just go to show how he is manipulating and feeling into Kylo's psyche, sort of feeding him all these lies. And it's clear that overall Kylo in acting on his actions does not ultimately shows that in his heart he is more cold-hearted and dark, but it's clear that he is being enabled by Snoke. He's constantly being put down, saying that he's a failure and just not worthy of being a leader, essentially. And then he's just killed off, like not even unceremoniously. It's a pretty awesome kill, but at the same time, if this dude's the supreme leader, why in God's name does he not recognize that the lightsaber is slowly turning towards him? That's stupid. It's just if there's one thing that I agree on with most of the criticism, it's that it's just you really weaken this main antagonistic force, and it's really a shame because I think he has a really interesting and engaging presence throughout the film. Andy Serkis also does a good job, and it's just a shame. If there's anything good, it does lead into one of the best action scenes in a Star Wars film in the last, I don't know, 20 years probably. I loved the choreography in that scene, but man, what a missed opportunity there.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it is justified, like, and kind of saying like, yeah, I don't like these certain parts of the film that way, because yeah, how couldn't he have not sensed it? I mean, I guess that there's sort of the argument that like, okay, he's sort of like Kylo is sort of masking about turning his lightsaber blade alongside using the Force to turn Rey's lightsaber, or in this case like Luke's lightsaber or whatever. So like I could see what they're doing. But like yeah, I could understand like how that could be a plot hole for a lot of people. And yeah, like these critiques are valid. I think they're so because like like you said, it's like there are a lot of like issues in just terms of execution and just how the film sort of presents itself. Like it's trying so many ideas, but it's like it's presenting them in ways that are just so sloppily put together. Like there's clearly one arc that was much better than the others. And
Yeah,
so I
no
feel
question.
like Yeah, so I think like, Johnson had the idea there. Um, and so I do like understand that in a lot of cases. And I think like the thing is, it's like it's a Johnson is the one that is super is used as the scapegoat in the situation. Which yeah, he directed it, he wrote the script, so he did have full creative control. But and I think it's because like Disney was so high on the idea of like Star Wars at the time because like okay, Force Awakens was very successful, Rogue One was really successful. How could this not be successful? We're doing the right things. We're actually being creative with a brand that people thought was done after Revenge of the Sith. And so I think there was a lot there where Disney was like, okay, yeah, you could just go in, do whatever you want with this. We'll sort of step aside, let you create the story. And I think that's kind of a good example of giving too much creative control. Um, because when let's face it, Ryan Johnson has a dream a lot of filmmakers have. They want to be on the level of somebody like Christopher Nolan, Scorsese, Spielberg, where they're all able to create what they want with no limitations. They have complete creative control, and they are pretty much the studio is going to step aside because they know that the film is going to be successful regardless of how it turns out. And I think Disney definitely demonstrated a lot of confidence in Star Wars early on. I think they're because even if like there were people that were sort of like you know at the time like a little mixed on Rogue One, like it was so successful. There are actually people that still love it. I think it's actually held up pretty well as a Star Wars film, all things considered. But I think there is but I think Ryan Johnson is an example of a filmmaker you probably shouldn't have given too much control to, especially for an IP as popular as Star Wars. Um, just because for one, you're going to be dealing with a very aggressive and gatekeeping fan base, and as a result, I mean, we know enough about Star Wars fans at this point that
Hmm.
at least like not like the fans are like okay yeah I love the films but the ones that are just so protective of the brand. So when I say Star Wars fans I don't mean like people that like genuinely love Star Wars and like you know forgive its faults in some cases or like just try to like say like that just like have genuine passion for it but they're open to new ideas. I'm talking about the ones that aren't. I'm working at you, Star Wars Theory. um like the thing is you can't gatekeep a franchise. You just can't. Like it's annoying. But the thing is, Disney knew that this fan base is very huge in the gatekeeping. Like just because they're so protective of Star Wars, like it's a sacred text, like you mentioned, like the Ten Commandments or the Bible. Like they're very protective of it. And so Disney should have realized that when they gave Johnson the free reign. And the thing is, like in filmmaking, when you have a director and you have a screenwriter that has this talent and has all these ideas, all this ambition, there has to be somebody on set that tell them that, like, okay, I really like what you're doing here, but let's try to hone in those ambitions. Let's try to improve this Finn and Poe plot. Let's try to like find ways to actually like make Snoke an intimidating villain. Let's try to because you're having a lot of creative ideas. We love what you're doing, but you got to hone in those ambitions. And this is filmmaking 101. There's
Yeah.
reasons why we have producers. There's reasons why we have script supervisors. Because those people keep keep the director and the screenwriter in check just to be sure everything is going the right way. If there's a problem, they got to find a way to fix it quickly, but also be sure that it makes sense. And they pretty much let Johnson run rampant without, letting, without realizing, like, yeah, you guys are really doing a lot with this IP, and there's going to be some people that are going to get mad. And what I mean by people, it's the ones that have not apologized to Jake Lloyd for the death threats they given him. So it's not a very, so Disney took a risk. And, I'm not saying like, I mean, because, I like the fact that this film takes the risks. I like
Mhm.
that. But the thing is, there needs to be a way to hone in those ambitions. And I think, Johnson obviously has proven that he could do it. I mean, obviously, the Knives Out trilogy has been proven to be very successful. And, Looper, I know there's like people that didn't like it, but, I think it's still a very effective sci fi film, all things considered. But there needed to be a little bit much more from Disney at this time to realize, like, okay, we needed to step in. And then once they stepped in, it was too late. I mean, and then now we're kind of sort of stuck with the safe blockbuster fluff that we just got from The Mandalorian and Grogu. Because Disney didn't step in to tell Ryan Johnson, like, hey, we like these ideas. We like that you're being creative with them, but we need you to find a way to keep it focused.
Do you think Disney should have even stepped in though? Because like, I don't know. It's most of my problems with the film has to do with the structure, not the content itself. Like, there's very few things in the film that. Okay, if we want to run down the things that people absolutely hate about the film, we've already talked about with the Haldo Post subplot. And additionally, just the character of Rose overall, which of course she got a lot of online harassment, which is absolutely terrible from the fan base, and that alone is incredibly shameful and is a big reason why I'm so alienated by that fan base to this day. And but it's more just the fact that her character hardly does much of anything in the film, and so there's just that people thinking that the film was woke, the changes they made to Luke, the fact that it didn't align with their expectations. And then also some things like we didn't talk about Leia force flying, for example, which that is certainly a contentious point. For me, the biggest problem is that it looks kind of silly, like from a visual effects standpoint, but they're acting as if what George Lucas wrote in 1976 or whenever he wrote Star Wars is like, oh, that's gospel. Cannot change. We can't even change we can't adjust where the comma is in the script. Just like, nope, this is what it's meant to be. It's like, okay, if you establish that in Empire Strikes Back, Luke can communicate with the corpse of Obi-Wan through the Force, I could believe that there might be something like that where someone could, quote, not even fly, but just, I don't know, using the gravitational pull. I guess that does explain why, there's no gravity in space. So maybe that's why, but I understand why it may be a little more far-fetched, but it's also not totally out of the ordinary when you analyze other parts of the franchise. But then also the whole light speed weapon thing that Holdo uses. I don't know how you feel about that, but
that's fucking awesome. I love that.
It's cool, but I don't want to go into like nitpicking, but it does tear that line of like physics, kind of like how people complain about Indiana Jones in the fridge in Crystal Skull. Just like, how would he survive that? Because the fridge blasts away at Mach 2. It's like, well, it's a sci-fi movie with talking Ewoks and aliens, and just if we overanalyze it at that point, we'll be here all day, and at that point Star Wars completely crumbles. So I don't know. The light speed thing is more just like, okay, look, it looks cool. So it's like you wanted a cool visual, so fine. But to go back to what you said about Ryan Johnson, the script, I don't really think it's just the content itself. It's just the fact that as a narrative roadmap, it just doesn't really work. So I don't know if he needed to do a second draft to flesh it out better. Like, even if you kept all the subplots the same, there had to have been a better way to weave through them, because it just seems very segmented throughout the film, almost like an excuse to explore Johnson's reinterpretation of the Star Wars mythology. But it's not like there were good steps for the characters to take. It's just, oh, we need to get them from point A to point B. What do we do? Okay, let's have Finn and Rose ride around those horses, or let's have Poe try to, I don't know, talk his way into getting Holdo to let him take control. And then all the stuff with Luke and Rey, that's pretty well done. And then the whole stuff with Kylo, him force communicating to you. Oh my God, we didn't even talk about the crate battle. How Luke basically, his force ghost is interacting with Kylo and all that, which I know a lot of people were also very happy about. So
Yeah,
there was that. There was another thing. Yeah. Oh, this film also gave birth to a lot of memes too.
Oh yeah.
Shirtless Ben Solo.
More
with his
more.
Prepare my ship. The porgs overall.
Yeah, I guess
the sacred text.
Yeah, I mean there is like stuff that is like forced. You get to tell. And I guess like
insanely forced.
And I guess to sort of like reiterate with the whole thing. I mean, I guess I don't think Disney was like the right term to use, but I think there's, it's I think it's like Lucasfilm producers like Kennedy or Abrams should have stepped in and try to find a way to make this script make sense. Because I think it's like letting Johnson and be able to like try to incorporate these ideas are awesome. I mean, honestly, I actually do like the payoff in this film. Like, it's really a really good emotional payoff, in my opinion. Where you have like Luke sort of diverting Kylo Ren and sort of like becoming like a legend, like something you would sort of see in like a samurai story where it's like one man stood up against an entire army and did not break to the wind at all. Like like that lives up to like the mythology that people were sort of like hearing about like Luke Skywalker, like at least in the Resistance in some cases. And it actually leads to like a really good emotional payoff in my opinion. And yeah, like I can understand people like, oh, it doesn't make any sense. Like, the whole force projection thing, like how are people able to see him? Like how much is he really projecting? But to me, I like think it's like, okay, he's probably knowing he's on his last legs. He's gonna like try to project his entire life force just to really give people that hope. And it's awesome. Like I mean, it's a really awesome sequence. And I think it actually does lead to a really strong end for the character. And like, sure, yeah, it doesn't make much sense, but I actually think that like it really works. Like it's very emotionally effective for me, and it's like, yeah, this is what it's all about. Like really, they really just are letting like just the legend live in some cases. Like that's how I just sort of read it. But back to sort of like the Johnson script issues, it's like there could have been somebody to try to like be there to let him know that like, okay, you have to find ways to like, if you want to use these ideas, you got to make them work in a cohesive way that fits in with the structure of this narrative, because otherwise you're sort of dealing with a ham-fisted film that feels like that it's just trying to cram too much in 2.5 hours. And I think that to me that's like what the big thing is like because I mean, yeah, I love this film. I mean, I don't think it's perfect, but I really enjoy it, and I still think it works very well in what it accomplishes despite its faults. But I do admit, like, yeah, there should have been a way to like try to get Johnson to hone those ambitions in a little bit and be sure that somebody kept them in check. So maybe not necessarily Disney, but maybe like J.J. Abrams should have like told him something beforehand, or Kathleen Kennedy should have. I mean, there should have been like a way for them to like look over the script and realize, okay, yeah, there's a lot of issues here, but I do like the ambition, but we're going to try to fix those issues so you could get a great product. So I think that's like more I was sort of saying. It's like, there should have, I wouldn't say like oversight, but there should have been at least a second opinion there. So
yeah, it kind of needed that. I mean, I know for some the people who are actively diehard fans, like, there's some people out there that proclaim The Last Jedi as the best Star Wars film. And there are elements where it can ride on that, but it's really the execution of it. I think also if it just took itself a little more seriously, which I know is weird because it already feels so serious, but a lot of it really comes down to some of the humor and dialogue too, where it really just distracts from the overall intention. And if the humor was funny, that would be fine, but it wasn't funny. It was just poor. Like
Yeah, like,
I
oh
don't
damn,
care
I'm
about
giving your mom joke.
yeah, like or the whole thing in the beginning when he's trying to talk to Hux and it's like he's ordering at McDonald's and you can't hear the operator on the other side of the drive-through speaker. Like it goes on way too long. The whole Porg stuff with the lightsaber or Chewie eating the Porg and the Porg looking like all sad. It's like, oh, look at it. It's so cute. It's like just what is the purpose of it? It's just adding. You're just padding out the runtime, and it's not really that good. If there's one line that I actually thought wasn't that bad that I assume was meant to be funny, it's when Luke reunites with Leia and Leia says something along the lines of like, I know what you're going to say. I changed my hair. Like, that's not a bad line, honestly. Like, that's cute. And that shows a level, in my opinion, a level of respect for the legacy characters because, yeah, we are reinventing these characters in a way that is so ambitious and so commendable, but we're also not afraid to give respect to the roots. Like, yeah, this is where they came from, and we're gonna give them a send off that feels sincere and respectful. Like, and to the people that say, if there's one thing that I absolutely fundamentally disagree with the criticism of the film is when the haters say Rian Johnson didn't care, he's a hack, and I cannot disagree more. It's like, say what you will about if you hate The Last Jedi, fine, but don't you dare say Rian Johnson didn't care because he would not put this level of thought and intent into reinventing the lore. It's not like he just pulled it out there and be like, oh, how can we screw over Luke's character in some way that just made no sense? Like, it makes sense from a narrative standpoint why he would want to do this in this fashion, especially given where Star Wars was at the time, because in some ways, even the prequels reinvented that in a way. Like, it tried to explain the whole Force thing, it was stupid how they compared it to, was it like a blood transfusion or something? It was like a bloodline thing. Yeah, like that is adding more credence and also, I guess, an officiality of just what it is. But you are establishing something new and reinventing it, maybe subverting the Force in a way that, was not what one expected. The only difference is that it was written and directed by George Lucas, so everyone treats it as gospel. So I'm curious, if we're to hypothesize this scenario, imagine if George Lucas wrote and directed The Last Jedi in the exact same way as Rian Johnson did. Would the fans react the same way? Would they be pissed, or would they just be like, oh, so George Lucas said it, that must mean it's true?
Honestly, does anybody remember the reaction to the prequels when they were released? And how, when the initial impressions from the Phantom Menace were like, okay, like, yeah, I think it was a good movie. I think it was a great movie. And then it's like, it took people such a long time to realize that, like, yeah, this isn't a good movie. Like, because, and the thing is, like, Lucas, like, didn't, like, I think I could see what he was wanting to do with it. Like, this is, Clone Wars has been mentioned a lot. But if you, like, watch Clone Wars, you go, okay, you could see what he was supposed to do. And I think, Star Wars fans watched Clone Wars, is like, okay, I think that doesn't make the films better, but it does make a lot of sense of what he wanted to do. So, like, in case you want to know what he wanted to do, watch Clone Wars. But I do think, but the thing is, the films themselves are not good. Maybe Episode 3 is probably the closest we can get to a good Star Wars movie, but it still has issues.
Yeah, it still does.
And so, I think the reaction would still be the same if Lucas wrote this. And you know what's funny? Star Wars fans, about your Jesus Christ and George Lucas and this film? He said, in quotes, on the Hollywood Reporter, that The Last Jedi was beautifully made.
Oh yeah, he did like it. That's right.
he liked it. He liked the film. So no, Star Wars isn't gospel. It's not gospel. I mean, if you're gonna go like blindly following like your Jesus figure in George Lucas, you're not being a good follower, are you?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's so ironic too because another core theme of the film is how blind faith is it can be a bad thing sometimes. Like, of course, we want to believe and put trust in those that we see as leaders or followers, but it's also sometimes just being blinded by that is all the more devastating, and that's exactly what's happening. What happened with the Last Jedi reception is that's just like, oh, George Lucas wouldn't have wanted this because this goes against the lore. Oh, wait, he liked it? Let's sweep that under the rug. We're not going to, let's just pretend he didn't say that because that doesn't go with our agenda. It's like, it's so crazy, the reception. I know this whole discussion has been very kind of heated in some ways, not even at the film, but more just at the fan base of just how reactionary it was. But no, it's justified because it's actually insane. Because if I just don't understand, like, as a fan, like, why I shouldn't even question this because it's Star Wars fans. They hate everything more than anything else. So
Yeah, and it's like good reasons why we talked about fandoms endlessly in the first 10 episodes of this podcast. Can you believe it? I mean, Michael Jackson fans, Charlie XCX fans, Swift fans. It's like we talked about them, fandoms as a whole, endlessly. I mean, and the thing is, like, fandoms are fandoms. Like, we're gonna get them no matter what the film it is. I mean, you're gonna see it a lot, especially with the new films that are coming out. But the thing is, it's like, if you want to like The Last Jedi, like The Last Jedi. If you want to hate The Last Jedi, you can hate The Last Jedi. But don't gatekeep something that didn't need to be gatekeeped. You know?
mm-hmm.
I mean, that's like the reason. And the thing is, like, if you're. The thing is, you got to be honest. Like, this is not the worst thing to come out of Star Wars. You know?
It's not even the worst film in this trilogy.
Not even the worst film in the series. It's far
Yeah.
worse. I mean, we just talked about Mando and Grogu and how that film not very left any impact. The film that came after wasn't very good, was it?
No.
No, it wasn't.
Sucked even worse.
I mean, but obviously, like, the thing is, I'm not gonna act like that, Ryan Johnson did a perfect job with something. He clearly didn't. I mean, he's not because the thing is, it's like you're a filmmaker that's going to be like making a film in probably one of the most profitable film franchises of all time. And it's a franchise of a lot of fans, a lot of good ones, a lot of bad ones, but it's a franchise that's put on such a high pedestal in film culture. So he was coming in with like really high expectations and knowing he can do this. And I think he accomplished what he wanted to do, albeit in a really sloppy way. But I still don't think this is a bad movie, in my opinion. But it's just like,
No.
but I think because the thing is, like, the emotional investment, I believe, is still there. Because it's easy to connect with Rey and Kylo and Luke. And I think there is an easy way to connect with the messages that this film is bringing to the table. And the thing is, like, I think there's a lot of good emotional payoffs here. I mean, like I said, but that Luke lightsaber sequence, like at the instead of a Crete or something on that salt planet.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's a great sequence. I mean,
yeah. All the starships too.
Yeah, just like the colors on that planet, just like watching the ships fly across like the salt, and you're just like seeing this red mist sort of just come behind them. Like, God, this is how can you not like appreciate the craftsmanship here? I mean, even if you don't like, the film, like I know a lot of people who don't like The Last Jedi. Like, how can you not enjoy, like, appreciate the craftsmanship that went into this? there's still the dedication to the practical effects. There's still the dedication to being sure, like that. Okay, yeah, we even if like the porgs are like annoying, like oh my god, they are actually in the room. Like those are puppets. Like it's going back to the roots that, like I said, Disney has accomplished very well when it comes to like animated puppetry. So I think so. It's like there is a lot of craftsmanship here. There's a lot of dedication. So how can you not say that Ryan Johnson didn't like Star Wars? You know, he loves it. Clearly, he's not not perfect. You know.
No, but Luke didn't train Rey to be the best Jedi ever, so it's bad. I don't even know if I would say this is a particularly good film, despite how much I'm praising it, because in my opinion, The Last Jedi is a much better conceptual movie than it is a narrative execution movie. I just really like thinking about the intent, the risks, and the thematic brevity, I guess, that is brought out of the film. And especially not only just from a studio film, more or less a Disney film, and even more or less a Star Wars film, that they were even able to make this. And that is insanely impressive. But I just, yeah, it's, despite all my defenses, it's just hard to say, yeah, this film is good, because there are some major problems with it that really hold it back. And it's just, I do admire the craft of it as well, as you say, because there are some really stellar sequences and some really good effects too. We didn't really talk about how the lightsaber fights in general too. I know people love to rave about the prequels action scenes, which those are good in their own right, but I think there's some fights here that are vastly underrated. And even though some characters are barely in the film, like the one that I can think of is when Finn and Phasma have their showdown, and Phasma just killed so quickly. Like she's in the movie for 2 minutes, and not a lot of development with that character either. So but just, man, the explosions going on in the background, the sparks, and how the whole ship is like burning around them. Like it's really visually striking. And I wish we saw that level of visual intrigue in some of the later Star Wars projects, because we just don't see that in The Mandalorian, for example. We don't really we sort of see that in The Rise of Skywalker, I guess, to some extent. Like, as stupid as it is that the remains of the Death Star blown up on that water planet align with the knife, it's a cool looking image, at least. Yeah, and to I know we're kind of all over the place, but to pivot to The Rise of Skywalker, I know that's another film that a lot of people hate, but I won't defend that movie as good either, because that movie kind of sucks, but it had the most unfair baggage to pick up from, because like J.J. Abrams, he knew well aware that the fans were pissed at The Last Jedi. So he's like, what do? We need to scramble to find a way to make the fans happy, but also pick up where we left off from what Rian Johnson established. And that film was cursed. There was you could resurrect Stanley Kubrick from the grave and he wouldn't be able to please the fans based on what The Last Jedi left off of in The Rise of Skywalker. I think it's an impossible task. So it's unfortunate that it really honestly wasn't the content of The Last Jedi that cursed the Star Wars sequel trilogy. It was the reactions from the fans. I genuinely believe that. And I think enough time has passed where I feel confident in saying that. Please don't send me any hate mail, but it was the fans that failed this film, not Disney, not Rian Johnson.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's just like, I think it's like, the thing is, like, I know people say like, what, The Rise of Skywalker, and I know we got to probably wrap up. We're almost approaching the 3-hour mark here, but
sure, yeah.
I do think that there is a like problem that Disney didn't realize they were running into when it came to The Last Jedi, and that was there was no plan for this trilogy at all. I think like the Force Awakens, all things considered, I think it's still a pretty solid reintroduction to Star Wars in general. But I think that was like Disney's prove it film. Like, okay, yeah, we can do Star Wars. We're gonna do it right, and they did. had some issues, but yeah, they did. But it was their prove it film. And this was
Yeah.
going to be another prove it film where it's like, okay, what is this franchise going to be leading to? And, at the end of the day, like I did want to see where it was wanting to lead to if like Disney decided to stay and like build off from the directions that Johnson created. Because, the thing is,
Mhm.
like, it is flawed. It is a very flawed film. But the thing is, like, there's probably a lot of examples of like film franchises that, have come from a film that is not particularly well received by anybody once it came out, but building on top of that and kind of trying to find ways to justify or at least try to plug up the holes that were recently left in those films. Um, and I think Disney could have found a way to do it. I think there is like something that they could have done to potentially like, continue on with what Johnson was wanting to do. And because the thing is, it's like it can't because Rise of Skywalker kind of felt like it was just trying to like escape from the Last Jedi in some cases. Like it barely even addresses anything that happened in that film. I
Yeah.
mean, Rose is like sidelined throughout the most of the film, and I don't think
Like a
she's that.
minute and a half
Yeah, like I
at
don't think
most.
she's like the worst character, but that is like apparently that was like a really not a good thing.
No.
Especially considering it is a character of a um Asian descent. And so I think that, that I think they pretty much went with the wrong perspective on that. I think that actually ended up coming off and incredibly prejudiced. But yeah, they didn't mention anything from the Last Jedi in that film. And so that's why a lot of people like sort of laugh at the Rise of Skywalker because they were clearly trying to do some damage control because they believed that Ryan Johnson did a lot of damage to the to the trilogy because the fans did not like the movie. And that's like and the thing is it's like that's the wrong idea to be getting from that. I mean, it really is. I mean, it's like you like can you imagine like if remember like Empire Strikes Back was not well received when it came out, but people over time started to like appreciate it, you know? But
Mhm.
the thing is George Lucas didn't pivot and ignore the events of that film. I mean,
No, it's more just the tone.
yeah, like he actually obviously, he did backtrack a little bit and like took out the dark tone a little bit and just tried to add a little more levity to it. Which was I think people had a complaint about with Empire Strikes Back, but now people like consider it to be like one of the best, if not the best film sequels of all time. But, you know, it's so Disney could have honestly like tried to build off of what they did with The Last Jedi and like find ways to like plug up those holes. I mean, and still continue on with like what Johnson was building towards because otherwise it sort of feels like that you're being feel like you're doing damage control for a film that didn't that yeah had issues but honestly was going in interesting new directions. And this inevitably led to a point where it's like now Disney has such a strong oversight of Star Wars now. I mean, outside of Andor and The Mandalorian, it's like everything sort of feels like that Disney is having notes on these projects now. It's like, and these notes are really impacting the final product. So it's just not, it's like they could have like really built into something to really bring this trilogy to the finish line without feeling like, okay, we're gonna make it Rey Skywalker now, and that's gonna be that. It's like, yeah, you guys.
Yeah. If we want to wrap up with I want to just bring this, and this is something, it might be a bit of a personal theory, but I do kind of believe it. It just seems like the polarized reception of The Last Jedi genuinely sparked not only a shift in Star Wars, but I think with just the entire American blockbuster. Because if we look at the representation of nostalgia post Last Jedi, it is all just member berries, references to the past, multiverses, and not really presenting an opportunity to challenge or change the perceptions of those past franchises. Just like, oh, bring back old characters and see them revel with the new ones. That's it. And it's crazy how just one film changed the entire outlook of what we now see with Hollywood features. And I guess that goes to show you the power of Star Wars. And it makes me wonder if by some miracle the fans actually liked this subversion. What would that have changed for, let's just say, something like the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Or if legacy sequels were to thrive even then, how would all of them be subversive or reinvent itself in dramatic ways? Like, I don't know. I just think it's a fascinating what if. And it really just goes to show that this, for better and for worse, if you love the film or hate the film, you cannot deny it is insanely important. It's almost like the Phantom Menace in that regard, where just that reception and just how omnipresent Star Wars was in terms of how it was like this event, and then it kind of shifted the tides in ways. Like, this is going to go down in like film history in some way, if you want to put it lightly. Is like, yeah, it's important with fan receptions and audience receptions, just how impactful it could be, even if you have good intentions and you're not lazy at all. It's just, there are some cases where fans really dictate the outlook of how films are produced, even if the movie made $1 billion, for example. Like, that's another thing. Like, the film didn't bomb. It wasn't like Joker 2 where just the audiences rejected it. It made a ton of money. So it's fascinating. It's just a fascinating film, for better and for worse.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess we'll just sort of just jump right into final thoughts, because obviously we pretty much hit the hammer on the head with this film. And it's the vision it's made, and like, of course, like the fans. um, and I mean the bad Star Wars fans, not the good Star Wars fans. But I guess I could just start.
Yeah, you can start.
Yeah. But I do. So initially, this film does have flaws. I think it has a lot of them. I think I've explained that it has like the reasons in depth of like those flaws too. But I don't think it's a bad movie. I think it has issues. It's definitely very uneven. There are just some plot lines that just either didn't need to be there or just felt pointless in the whole scheme of things. And it certainly does like do things that might, the subversion could be like a little bit off-putting at times, but honestly, like the stuff for Rey, Kylo, and Luke, like that, to me, that saves the movie. Because I think the emotional payoffs from those characters really help the film stand above its uneven surface. Um, because, and yeah, I know there's like people like, okay, like Luke Skywalker, this is not Luke Skywalker. Like, yes, it is. It's just a version of Luke Skywalker that is very disgruntled. He's somebody that has stayed away from the Force too long and is coping with the idea of his failures. But it's the idea of like the fact that he's able to come back from those failures and sort of become the legend that people know him to be. And it's also the fact that, like, yeah, there is great idea here about letting the past die and just trying to move on in new creative directions while still having that legacy intact. Just because something gets burned down does not mean it's gone. I mean, I think there was, that scene where Yoda like sets it all on fire. It's like, these are just texts. These aren't necessarily, you know, like the end all be all. Like this is something to build off. And I always felt like that, Johnson was directly speaking to Star Wars fans for that reason, because it's like, yeah, I mean, you can still admire like the legacy that these leave, but you got to realize, like, in order for this franchise to live on, it needs to be going in different directions that could really change the perception of the franchise, while also still giving people those experiences of seeing Star Wars in the theaters for the first time. So yeah, I mean, so it's not a film that is perfect. I'm not going to act like it is. Like I said, those flaws are still very apparent and do derail the film. But I still do think that the risks Johnson took with the story are very commendable, and those arcs between Luke, Leia, and Rey work very well. And plus, it's visually gorgeous, and it's probably one of the best like looking Star Wars films to date. So yeah, I give it a 7 out of 10. I did initially have it an 8, but yeah, I mean those flaws are still apparent, but I think 7 is probably where I keep it. So
Yeah, I'm there's a part of me that wants to give it a higher rating. So I'll just say it right now. My rating is a 5 out of 10 because there are elements of the film that are genuinely fantastic, but there's also some stuff that really drags down the entire experience where it just makes even the really great stuff just kind of hard to get through just because of some of the poorer things. So it's a shame because conceptually how it reinvents the Star Wars mythology and how it is not afraid to change character motivations and also explore really challenging material with franchises, how kind of like you were saying, letting the past die, burning the sacred texts, and yeah, just the fact that it's not even like the film is subtle in that way. It's very overt with how it's addressing this to the fan base. It's a massive swing, but then it's also just kind of bogged down by execution. Like as a narrative, it's all over the place. Some of the effects, despite looking really, really great from a cinematography standpoint, some of the effects are kind of bad. There's some of the character arcs are just really rushed. There's some subplots where I genuinely just do not care about. And yeah, it's in a weird way. It's like, I wish I liked the film more because of how confident it was acting. And before seeing this, my rating, I think, was like a low 4 out of 10, mostly because of the canon changes. But now it's teetering on a 6. But I think a 5 out of 10 is where I'm at, mostly because of how, like I said, it tries. It really tries, unlike Mandalorian and Grogu, which didn't try. So yeah, I would much rather have something that tries and kind of fails than something that doesn't try at all yet still fails. So that's a good way to summarize how I feel about The Last Jedi. An admirable misfire in some ways.
yep, well, that was a lofty conversation.
Yeah, man.
We managed to. I think we're gonna match the runtime of Lord of the Rings. But
Probably, yeah.
Still very, very fruitful. But yeah. Well, we got a recommendation, and it's not for me. Take it away.
Yeah, so we have another special guest coming on to the podcast. Next episode, we're going to bring in a good friend of ours, and it's Orson Codd, who we went to school with, also at the AFI. So we're going to bring him on, and I'm going to be announcing his guest rec. You don't know this yet, Daniel, so this will be a surprise for you. It is a very important film. It's a film we've both seen, and the director is also very, very well established, dabbling in all sorts of genres, and has recently been coming back into the news with a new project, and also is rumored to be sort of exploring a similar topic. And that film that Orson recommended is Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Oh, damn. It's gonna hit me right in the
Yep.
childhood.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, yeah. Let's talk about it. And no cap, like probably one of my most influential directors ever made. But yeah,
it's our first Spielberg film that we're going to talk about, I think.
First one we're going to talk about. First one until the next one. So it's I'm not ready. And you'll probably hear why. And if you want to hear why and hear us talk about Close Encounters of the Third Kind, directed by the legendary Steven Spielberg, as recommended by our guest host Orson Cod on our next episode, and don't want to get spoiled, watch the film before the next episode, which releases every other Monday. And if you haven't already, you could follow us on social media, which our links are in the description. And if you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, feel free to hit us with a follow. And if you're listening on YouTube, hit that like and subscribe button along with the bell icon so you can get notified when a new video comes out. And I'm not going to be dropping my address below because I know there's going to probably be potentially some Star Wars fans that are going to be coming to where I live and throwing pitchforks at my window. But just so you know, George Lucas said The Last Jedi was beautifully made, so you guys are in the wrong that one. But otherwise, I've been Daniel.
And I've been Matthew.
And I hope you guys have a good rest of your week.
May the Force be with you.